Good afternoon. Welcome to the Assembly Committee on Revenue. Will the Secretary please take roll?
Assemblywoman Anderson. Assemblywoman Benitez Thompson. Assemblywoman Bilbray Axelrod.
Here.
Assemblywoman Considine. Assemblyman Hafen. Assemblywoman Kasama. Assemblyman Miller. Assemblyman O'Neill. Assemblyman Ortlicker. Assemblyman Roberts. Assemblyman Yeager. Chair Cohen.
Thank you, and I am here. Please mark Vice Chair Benitez Thompson present when she arrives and Assemblyman Roberts present when he arrives. They're both presenting bills in other committees. But with that, we do have a quorum, so we are going to get started. Welcome. Okay, BPS, I'm hearing that no one can hear me? It's on. Okay, so I will move. Is that better?
Yes, sure, we can hear you.
Okay. It's too big, it's too long. The desks are not made for short people. So anyway, welcome to this afternoon's hearing on revenue. I'd like to welcome everyone who's here in person. It's nice to see people in the room and those watching us online and joining us on Zoom. Our meetings are regularly scheduled for 4 p.m. on Tuesdays and Thursdays, although for the next couple of weeks, that will be somewhat up in the air, so pay attention to the schedule, please. Just some housekeeping before we begin. Members and presenters, please silence your electronic devices. Courtesy and respect in our interactions during the meeting is required. Additionally, courtesy and respect when working with staff before and after the meetings is required. Committee members will be using our laptops and possibly other screens and devices to view exhibits. So due to that, you may see members looking at different screens, that type of thing. Please don't take that as a sign of disrespect or inattention. We're just trying to juggle everything we've got on our multiple screens. As a reminder, and as stated in our agenda, we will have public comment, which will occur at the end of the hearing, at the end of the meeting, and may be limited in duration. And details on how to participate during public comment are available on Nellis, which you can get to on the legislature's website. Anyone wishing to provide testimony or attend meetings virtually or in person must pre-register online on the Nellis website, and registration opens when agendas are posted to the legislature's website. As a reminder, pursuant to rule number 54 of the Assembly Standing Rules, testifying in support of a bill means that you support and approve of the measure as written, or approve of the measure as written along with proposed amendments that have been approved by the sponsor of the measure. Opposition to a bill or resolution means that you're not supporting the measure as written, or you're opposing the measure as revised by an amendment that has not been approved by the sponsor of the measure. And a neutral position on a bill means that you're just offering particular insight on the measure, but you're expressing no position on the measure. So as an example, if you love a bill, but you want to change anything in the way that it's written, and you don't have an amendment that's been accepted by the sponsor, you must testify in opposition, but please feel free to say that you love the bill otherwise and let us know that. So with that, we are going to move on to our work session. And on Senate Bill 25 and Senate Bill 74, and Mr. Nakamoto, please go ahead and take us through the bills for the work session.
Thank you, Madam Chair. For the record, Michael Nakamoto, Deputy Fiscal Analyst with the Fiscal Analysis Division of the Legislative Counsel Bureau. The first bill on today's work session is Senate Bill 25, which was sponsored by the Senate Committee on Revenue and Economic Development on behalf of the Department of Taxation, and which was heard in this committee on April 15th. The bill repeals provisions in Chapter 372 of the NRS, which is the state 2% sales and use tax rate, as well as Chapter 374, which contains the local school support tax, to maintain the state's compliance with the Streamlined Sales and Use Tax Agreement, of which Nevada is a full member state. The bill eliminates a requirement of existing law which predates Nevada's adoption of the Streamlined Sales and Use Tax Agreement, and which requires the Department of Taxation, in determining whether food intended for human consumption is subject to the sales and use tax, to base its determination on whether the food is intended for immediate consumption and not on the type of establishment where the food is sold. Based on regulations adopted pursuant to LCB file number R056-18, filed on June 8, 2020, the Department of Taxation makes its determination on whether food for human consumption is subject to the sales and use tax based on the percentage of food sold by the seller that qualifies as prepared food. Madam Chair, if there are any questions about the bill, I would be glad to answer them. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Nakamoto. Additionally, if we could please mark Assemblyman Roberts present. Additionally, committee, we do have Director Young from the Nevada Department of Taxation and Chief Deputy Executive Director Hughes from the Department of Taxation also available to answer questions. So with that, do we have any questions? Okay, seeing none, I will take a motion on Senate Bill 25 to do pass. Okay, I have a motion from Assemblyman Miller. Do I have a second? I'll second. I have a second from Assemblyman O'Neill. Do we have any comments, committee? Okay, with that, if we could please take the roll. We're so spread out.
Assemblywoman Anderson.
Yes.
Assemblywoman Benitez Thompson. Assemblywoman Bilbray Axelrod.
Yes.
Assemblywoman Considine.
Yes.
Assemblyman Hafen.
Yes.
Assemblywoman Kasama.
Yes.
Assemblyman Miller.
Yes.
Assemblyman O'Neill.
Yes.
Assemblyman Ortlicker.
Yes.
Assemblyman Roberts. Assemblyman Yeager.
Yes.
Chair Cohen.
And I'm a yes, so that passes unanimously of all members who are here. And I will ask Assemblyman O'Neill to please do the floor statement. You're welcome. And with that, Mr. Nakamoto, please go on to Senate Bill 74.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Again, for the record, Michael Nakamoto with the Fiscal Analysis Division. The second and final bill on today's work session is Senate Bill 74, which was also sponsored by the Senate Committee on Revenue and Economic Development on behalf of the Department of Taxation, and which was also heard in this committee on April 15th. The bill eliminates the requirement for the Department of Taxation to use the population totals issued by the Census Bureau for the purposes of distributing certain taxes and making certain determinations based on population in the case of a conflict between the population totals certified by the governor and the population totals issued by the Census Bureau. Specifically, Senate Bill 74 eliminates the requirement to use the population totals issued by the Census Bureau in the case of a conflict with the population totals certified by the governor from the provisions of NRS 360.690, which governs the local government tax distribution account, also known as the Consolidated Tax Distribution, or the C-Tax, as well as NRS 377.057, which governs the distribution of the 1.75% supplemental city-county relief tax, otherwise known as the SCCRT. The bill amends NRS 377.055 to clarify that the population totals certified by the governor are to be used to determine the distribution of the proceeds from the 0.5% basic city-county relief tax, or BCCRT, and also eliminates obsolete references to the terms enterprise district, local government, and special district, as they are not referenced or used for the administration of the provisions of Chapter 377 of the NRS. Madam Chair, members of the committee, if there are any questions, I would be glad to answer them. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Nakamoto. Do we have any questions, committee? Okay, seeing none, I will take a motion to do pass. I have a motion from Assemblyman Yeager. Do I have a second? Second from Assemblywoman Kasama. Do we have any comments, committee? Okay, seeing none, let's go ahead and take a roll call again.
Assemblywoman Anderson,
Yes.
Assemblywoman Benitez Thompson, Assemblywoman Bilberry Axelrod,
Yes.
Assemblywoman Considine, Assemblyman Hafen,
Yes.
Assemblywoman Kasama, Assemblyman Miller,
Yes.
Assemblyman O'Neill,
Yes.
Assemblyman Ortlicker,
Yes.
Assemblyman Roberts, Assemblyman Yeager,
Yes.
Chair Cohen.
And I'm a yes, thank you. And I will ask Assemblywoman Kasama to do the floor statement, please. Okay, thank you. And with that, we will end our work session and we will move on to our bill presentation, and I'll invite up Assemblywoman Nguyen to present Assembly Bill 363, which revises provisions governing transient lodging. Welcome to Assembly Revenue. Please go ahead when you're ready.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chair Cohen and members of the Revenue Committee. For the record, I am Assemblywoman Rochelle Nguyen. I represent Assembly District 10. I would also be presenting with Assemblyman Tom Roberts, but I thought he was going to be in another department, but he can just wave over there as a support section on your committee. He will be amended as a part of the conceptual amendments onto Assembly Bill 363 as well. So I guess you're just going to hear from me today and a couple of other supporters of Assembly Bill 363. For the record, I want to say that this is a bipartisan effort that is such because it affects all of Nevadans. Again, I'm here to present Assembly Bill 363 for your consideration. This bill seeks to revise provisions relating to short-term rentals. For those of you who are not familiar with the term short-term rental or STR from the hundreds of emails that you probably received over the last week, it's more commonly known by a lot of people as like Airbnbs or VBROs or Verbos. And much like Kleenex is synonymous with tissues now, STRs are synonymous with the term Airbnb. To give you a little background on Assembly Bill 363 and the inspiration that I took from creating this bill and the language and the intent that's contained in it, it didn't come from industry players. It didn't come from anyone. It actually came from my own personal experience. As many of you know, I have a very large multi-generational family that all lives with me. It is me, my husband, my 2 kids, my father, my father-in-law, and of course, Neil, our spoiled dog. And when we travel, we predominantly use STRs, as having multiple hotel rooms doesn't always work for us, especially when we all travel together. And yes, it is the circus that you are imagining when we all travel together in our minivan. But additionally, I have personal experience because of my district and my own home district and where my home is located within Assembly District 10. We are in super close proximity to downtown Las Vegas as well as the Las Vegas Strip. My district's close proximity to the tourist corridor and its lack of HOAs and gated communities means that my neighborhood, like others in Clark County and around the state of Nevada, is ripe for STRs. And not just party houses, although we do have those in our neighborhood, as well as I'm sure some of you have experiences with those party homes that we talk about that are used in this short-term rental-like space. But we also have homes that cater to families such as my own when we're traveling. But what I love about my district and what I love about my neighborhood is that we are a real community. We have block parties. I know my neighbors. They know my children. They know my dog. They know the grandpas. And I also don't want my neighborhood to become a series of mini hotels where my kids can't go out and play with individuals. So about 18 months ago, I started reaching out to community members who were having troubles with party homes in their neighborhoods, talking to people about affordability of housing issues, housing shortages in our community. I met with police chiefs about the problems in party homes and unregulated STRs. I even met with neighbors trying to make extra income by investing in STRs or even renting out rooms in their own homes. I met with labor groups such as culinary and resorts and chambers and realtors and just about anyone that would talk to me over the last 18 months. I know you will hear from many of them today. I know many of them have reached out to you via email from our state as well as other states that are looking to come and invest. So what are my intentions with this bill? One, looking around the state and within Clark County, I realized that it was unclear for those looking to get involved in either investing in STRs or even staying in STRs, what kind of the rules and what was going on and how we were handling them in our state. There were jurisdictions within our state, such as the largest county with the largest population, such as Clark, that had banned them. There were other jurisdictions and localities that had very restrictive things like owner-occupied, so you could only have STRs if they were like a bed and breakfast type situation. Or there were jurisdictions that had 1,000-foot setbacks between STRs, no use of pools and quiet hours and other regulatory things that they had put in place. So I quickly realized that I felt like Nevadans needed some clarity. I don't believe bans work, and despite what some of the emails say and that you have received, I wanted to make sure that counties and cities could not ban them. I don't think they work. I think we are missing out on the potential revenue, and it makes it difficult for our counties and cities to enforce, what is being perpetrated in our communities with these investment properties. Number two, the bill also seeks to set some standards for collecting uncollected revenue, room tax revenue parity. Right now, I suggest you look at your app for Airbnb or HomeAway or Vrbo or any of the other types of apps, or going onto the website, and you will see hundreds, if not thousands, of listings, most of them operating unlawfully. We are not collecting those taxes. We are not collecting that revenue. And so I believe that there does need to be parity in this situation. Third, this bill also seeks to protect Nevadans, protect our resorts and neighborhood gaming companies who have invested in our communities and our state, protect our workers who are employed and have fought hard to make sure they have safe working conditions within those resorts, and also seek to protect Nevadans from rising housing costs associated with unregulated proliferation of STRs. The bill also enables and allows local jurisdictions to be able to enforce those that are operating unlawfully. I will say that even despite the months and months of working on this bill, it is still very much a dynamic working document. I know that you received a bunch of amendments that are in a very conceptual form today. But there are certain places that I know that we still need to work on. I think the enforcement, the civil enforcement, to give our local jurisdictions authority to be able to impose civil, penalties on some of these properties that are acting unlawfully or recklessly. Rather than take you through the 17 pages of the bill section by section, many of you know that I have been working with a hugely diverse group of stakeholders on the issue over the past 18 months. I was looking at my notes just the other day, and it looks like I've taken over 72 documented meetings, phone calls, and Zoom calls over the past 18 months. And I still have meetings scheduled for later this week and into the next week with those same stakeholders. And today I am proud of the diverse group of individuals and organizations that are here in support. And I'm also proud to work with those people that know that I will continue to reach out with them to see how, where we can get to a good bill. Is it going to be a perfect bill? No, no bill exists. But it is definitely a step in the right direction. Again, I apologize for the amendments. You should see them. I believe they've been uploaded to Nellis at this point. I will start out with, because of the diverse nature of the state, I felt like one of the biggest things that I had to do in order to start the conversation on STRs is I do intend on amending to include a population cap of 700,000. While I believe that STRs are an issue for an entire state, at this time, the unique nature geographically, physically, and even politically of areas of our state, many of the provisions that are currently contained in AB 363 just don't make sense for everyone at this time. However, I am committed to continue to work with these jurisdictions moving forward to make sure. Again, a lot of the other conceptual amendments were meant to streamline the process for other local jurisdictions, as well as give needed clarity to other sections where it was lacking. Again, this kind of concludes my portion of the presentation for Assembly Bill 363. I would like, you want to say something? Yeah. Would you like to go after Virginia and Jim? Okay. At this time, it looks like we have Assemblyman Roberts that would like to also give a presentation. And Chair Cohen, with your permission, after Assemblyman Roberts, if we can have Virginia Valentine, who I see on the Zoom with the Nevada Resort Association, and then Jim Sullivan of Culinary Local 226.
Of course. Welcome, Assemblyman Roberts, to the
Thank
dais.
you, Madam Chair and fellow members of the Revenue Committee. For the record, Assemblyman Tom Roberts, Assembly District 13 in Southern Nevada. I'll just say a few brief words, and I'll turn it over to Virginia Valentine. Look, the reason I wanted to work on this piece of legislation with Assemblywoman Wynn is I know from my law enforcement times that STRs and the bans that we have in Clark County it provide a number of issues for neighborhoods throughout the valley. And our police officers don't have the tools necessary to police those, neither do code enforcement. And I think by putting some of this in state statute and having some of the systems in place to allow for us to cooperate, or law enforcement to cooperate with these companies so that we can identify the folks that are operating underground. Although we don't have a significant law enforcement piece in this virtual amendment yet, I can tell you that we're working on that, and we will work to get something that code enforcement and our local law enforcement are supportive of. I think you'll find that just by her testimony and some of the people that will testify today, Assemblywoman Wynn has worked diligently over the 18 months to bring something together. And as you can imagine, when you have a topic like this, you can't get everybody on the same page. But sometimes that's a good indication you got a good piece of legislation. Everybody hates it. So you found a real good middle ground. That not everybody's happy, and it's really a good bipartisan approach. And so with that, I'll turn it over to Ms. Valentine so that she can make her presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. For the record, my name is Virginia Valentine, and I'm president of the Nevada Resort Association. Good afternoon, Madam Chairwoman Cohen and committee members. It's an honor to be here to participate in presenting this bill with Assemblywoman Wynn. Off to a good start here. AB 363 is a comprehensive piece of legislation reflecting the input of many stakeholder groups, and I'd like to thank Assemblywoman Wynn for all her hard work in bringing this bill together and acknowledge all the many stakeholders, very diverse perspectives, and all who have participated in the process. We appreciate Assemblywoman's willingness to work with us to create effective legislation that protects consumers, preserves residential neighborhoods and affordable housing, and addresses illegal short-term rental market and the subsequent millions of dollars in lost tax revenue. This bill establishes consistent requirements and creates a level playing field by regulating and taxing these commercial operations similarly to other highly regulated public accommodation facilities. It also contains the necessary enforcement measures to ensure compliance. Nevada's resort industry prides itself on being the gold standard in hospitality, and we are held to strict regulations to ensure that we are protecting the health and safety of employees and guests and meeting the very high standards expected of us. Our members have invested millions of dollars to ensure a safe and secure environment. We're regulated and inspected by multiple agencies, including the Nevada Gaming Control Board, state OSHA, local health districts, fire and building departments, and city and county business licensing. As you know, this past summer, the legislature passed SB 4, which enacted even stricter regulations for public accommodation facilities due to the pandemic. We supported the measure as well as the well-being of our employees, our guests, and that's paramount, and incorporated that into what all our members do. To protect Nevada's reputation as a safe and welcoming destination, AB 363 includes vital consumer protection provisions to ensure short-term rentals are providing safe spaces for those who choose to stay there and investing in appropriate safeguards. As the lifeblood of Nevada's economy, the resort industry has a tremendous responsibility to communities across the state. Gaming was legalized 60 years ago to generate tax revenue, protect consumers, and to attract tourists to Nevada. Today, that act has allowed the resort gaming industry to lead the state by being the largest contributor to jobs, tax revenue, capital investment, and destination marketing. We create and generate jobs and invest in our employees. For fiscal year 2020, the tourism industry paid more than $58 billion in wages and health benefits to employees. The industry provides high-quality jobs with good salaries that lead to home ownership. And listening to our employees, we know the affordable housing continues to be the top of their mind as they look to establish roots in neighborhoods. This bill will help address these concerns in finding an affordable home. In total, more than 443,000 jobs statewide are supported by our industry due to our robust investments in our properties, amenities, and associated infrastructure. With more than $15 billion in tourism projects, the development pipeline, our commitment to economic development and growth is evident. As the state's largest taxpayer, the resort industry pays a long list of general business and industry-specific taxes. We generate 34% of the state's general fund revenue and pay $1.3 billion in industry taxes and fees in FY 2020. One of the state's most beneficial industry-specific taxes is the Transient Lodging Tax or room tax. Southern Nevada generates nearly 90% of all room tax generated in the state. In fiscal year 2020, Southern Nevada room tax alone generated $596 million. Nearly 23% of that went to the state's education fund. That's about $135 million. About 12% of that, or $43.4 million, went to capital projects for the Clark County School District. I'd like to point out that since 2000, Southern Nevada's room tax has generated more than $1.4 billion for CCSD capital projects. Local jurisdictions in Clark County received more than $50 million for local projects and services, such as public safety and parks in fiscal year 20. More than $45 million in room taxes went to transportation projects in Clark County. And to keep tourists returning, $291 million went to promoting the destination by funding the Nevada Commission on Tourism and the LVCVA, as well as supporting critical tourism infrastructure projects like the Las Vegas Visitor and Convention Center's expansion and the Las Vegas Stadium Authority. In Northern Nevada, the room tax generated $47.2 million. This funding supports the RSCVA in marketing Northern Nevada to visitors and provides funding for the state, Washoe County, and the cities of Reno and Sparks, Incline Village, and Crystal Bay. In all, the room tax is vital to creating a strong quality of life for Nevadans. By subjecting short-term rentals to room tax, residents north and south will benefit from the additional revenue that is not being collected today. And it only seems fair that short-term rentals should pay their share, given the many benefits they receive from the destination marketing work of the LVCVA and the RSCVA, which are funded by room tax. In closing, Nevada's resort industry continues to play a leading role in Nevada's economy by investing in our people and our future. We believe this bill will continue to ensure Nevada's tourism industry thrives and the state benefits from its success. So we ask you to support this bill. Our thanks again to Assemblywoman Nguyen for her leadership. Thank you, Chair Cohen, and members of the committee for the opportunity to speak to you today.
Thank you, Ms. Valentine. With that, why don't we go to Mr. Sullivan, please?
Good evening, committee. My name is Jim Sullivan, Jimsullivan, and I'm representing the Culinary Union. The Culinary Union has been advocating for enforceable short-term rental regulations at multiple levels of government for years. As Nevada's largest union, an organization of immigrants, women, Latinx, Black, and AAPI workers, we believe that our state must consider how short-term rentals have negatively affected affordable housing, the quality of life problems that they often bring to residential areas, and ensuring that operators play by the same rules as other lodging operators when considering a regulatory framework for short-term rentals. First, any regulations concerning short-term rentals must consider the impact on affordable housing in Nevada. Throughout the country, unregulated or poorly regulated short-term rentals have caused affordable housing crises, and we must take proactive steps to prevent that from happening in Nevada. The multi-billion-dollar short-term rental industry has drawn in investors who buy up multiple housing units for investments, which means that fewer homes are available to long-term renters. Rents then rise because of limited supply. If short-term rentals are to be permitted, there should be restrictions on landlords and outside investors who take apartments out of the long-term rental market and a strict limit on how many short-term rentals a person or entity can own or operate. In addition, culinary union members and hospitality employees who work different shifts in a 24-hour economy have long raised concerns about the quality of life issues that come along with short-term rentals in residential areas. Workers have complained of party houses that keep them and their neighbors up at night and have turned their neighborhoods into unruly, unofficial resort corridors. Unfortunately, the quality of life issues that come along with short-term rentals in residential areas don't just end with loud music at parties. There have been multiple violent incidents at parties at short-term rentals in Las Vegas over the last few years. Lastly, short-term rental operators should have to abide by the same rules as other lodging providers. This means that short-term rentals should be taxed and regulated like any other public accommodation facility. Enforcement of any regulations will be crucial if Nevada is committed to eliminating illegal short-term rentals. Without strict enforcement and substantial penalties for noncompliance, illegal short-term rentals will continue to flourish. Illegal short-term rentals have been a nuisance in our neighborhoods, contributed to affordable housing crises around the country, and have mostly avoided being taxed and regulated like other lodging providers. AB 363 addresses these issues and creates an enforceable regulatory framework for this growing industry. The Culinary Union applauds Assemblywoman Nguyen for bringing this bill forward and urges the committee to support and pass AB 363. Thank you, committee, for letting me testify.
Thank you, Mr. Sullivan. Assemblywoman, are you ready for questions, or I think that was everyone you had speaking?
I'm ready.
Okay. So before we go into questions, could we just, I understand this has been a work in progress, and I definitely know that you've been meeting with people constantly and that it's been kind of a moving target. But and I don't want you to go through all 17 pages, but can you just give us the 3,000 foot, a little, maybe go down to 20,000 and give us just a little more. So for instance, this would be something that would be, there'd be a pop cap, but so within Clark County, this would be all of Clark County, or would the, municipalities within Clark County have any control? What are we doing with that?
I'll try, Rochelle Nguyen for the record. I will go ahead and try to give you like a high level overview of it.
Great, thank you.
I know that many of your committee members have already reached out to me with some of their questions, and I'd be happy to answer those to like create a more substantial legislative record as well. Currently, Clark County, obviously, the majority of the population lives in Clark County, in the majority of Clark County, STRs are not they're banned. These folks are currently skirting the law, which really means that it's millions of dollars in lost revenue for Nevadans. Bans are just not working for any Nevadans. That's my opinion on it, as well as in talking to people. So when you look at this, I actually took some of this language from a 2017 bill that Assemblywoman Irene Bustamante had brought. And back in 2017, it looked at collecting these room taxes via the, I guess, short-term rental platforms, for lack of a better term. So they would do it. And actually in working with them, and I see some of them either here to testify in opposition or in neutral, have been very helpful in kind of explaining to me how their platforms worked. I know that in 2017, a lot of them were opposed to this kind of like tax, like revenue collection like process. But now, we've seen technology emerging. We've seen them go into markets where they are already doing this, and they are doing this in parts of our state already. So they do have the like framework already internally to be able to do this. So a portion of the bill is a bill that had been previously introduced, and I think in 2017 it just wasn't the right time. We weren't in the right place to be able to move that forward. So a lot of that goes into this. And in fact, my conversations with most of the major platforms that like have short-term rentals on them, I would call them short-term rental like facilitator platforms, didn't really have any like objection to that kind of collection. So the first part of the bill kind of has to do with that. and defining what that means, what that includes. And there is some amendments to make sure that we are capturing not just those short-term facilitator platforms, recognizing that this is a changing kind of dynamic technology that people are using and getting into, finding loopholes, finding creative ways out of it. So we've tried to keep the language as vague. So when there are other platforms out there, or there are other mechanisms to do this, we will be able to also collect from them as well. The second part kind of talks about some of the definitions and what must be included. And what we were looking at with some of these, I'm going to call them distance requirements, occupancy requirements, those kind of things. What we are trying to curb is like this proliferation in neighborhoods of short-term rentals where they are just unlimited. You could go down your street, and like I had said during my initial presentation, where you would have a situation where you could have a whole street of short-term rentals that you would be living on. And we are looking to curb that. By having distance requirements of 500 feet in the proposed amendment, and that's a 360-degree 500 feet, as well as that distance separation from non-restricted gaming resort properties with hotels. And that is at 2,500 feet, which is about half a mile, to give you some perspective on how much that is. We knew that there was also some like confusion there because there are a lot of like properties that are currently being utilized unlawfully as short-term rentals along the Las Vegas Strip in some of these high-rise communities. And so we did want to have some flexibility because after speaking with people over the past 18 months, if there are too many restrictions, people just do it anyway. And so if you make it accessible and you have like reasonable restrictions, I believe that we will be able to like more accurately monitor and regulate. It will help law enforcement. It will help our county code enforcement. It will help, be able to collect those like uncollected taxes and bring some parity there. I also wanted to recognize that in some of our neighborhood community, like our neighborhood gaming establishments, they're putting a real investment, like physically, like in building properties and housing. Sometimes they are a anchor in a certain neighborhood as far as business and industry and tourism and locals that are working there and are contributing to the economy. So we wanted to make sure that there weren't like zones around them that were just people were not staying in the hotels any longer. They were just staying in like the high-rise communities exclusively. And so that's kind of that section. And there's some distance requirements, requirements about not having events and parties and other things. And that was aimed at curbing like large gatherings. You might hear from people talking about how some of these short-term rentals are used to have huge parties where there's cover charges and there's day parties, and you will hear probably from some neighbors, if you haven't in emails, where people are illegally or unlawfully installing septic tanks to accommodate like large banks of like bathroom facilities at some of their properties. And so some of these regulations and some of these things that we've incorporated in here are aimed at like targeting those kind of bad actors. And some of the requirement on room nights, that had been amended from 3 to 2 was to get away from people that were renting a house for a party night and, conducting these illegal like parties at the house. And they would typically do so in one day. I would, and I still do plan on increasing some of the enforcement provisions, as you heard Assemblyman Roberts talk about. I know when I reached out to Chuck Calloway with the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department, as well as Corey Solferino up in Washoe, one of the things that I asked them, I said, what can we do to like make this, what can we do to help you all when you get these calls? How can we do this? And they said, we need to hold the owners responsible who are renting these properties. They have found that in most cases, they know exactly what's going on at their properties when they're rented, especially some of these larger properties that are clearly meant for parties. So, like I said, this is a very ongoing process, and those are all the things that we are trying to incorporate in here. So I hope that's a high enough level or low enough level overview of the bill.
Thank you. I do just want to kind of get some of the highlights of the conceptual amendment as well. So, because we have heard from many Nevadans who have invested a lot in their short-term rentals, and so there's going to be a grandfather clause, correct? Can you give us a little more information about that as well?
I'm sorry,
Is your mic on?
Sorry, Rochelle Wynn for the record. Thank you for that question, Madam Chair. When we had initially drafted the language and talking with legal and talking with some of the jurisdictions that already had like STR regulations or procedures in place or had already issued licenses or permits or registrations, like depending on where you are, they call it different things. It was going to be a very large grandfathering community that would be included in there. In order to avoid like potential litigation for some of these other places that had already established these provisions, the grandfathering clause made the most sense given those circumstances.
Okay, and since right now with Clark County, it's not allowed, the grandfathering it's not with, someone who needs to be grandfathered in doesn't need to have already been registered with the county, it's with Airbnb or Vrbo or one of those platforms?
Rochelle Wynn for the record. I'm not sure I understand your question.
Well, how does someone get grandfathered in? I mean, what do they need to do? What do they need to have been doing the last few months?
There are properties that prior to bans or prior to changes in status, like prior to going to owner occupied or prior to, like Henderson has STRs, that they have a registration process. So they are existing in the Henderson community, like in the city of Henderson. So it's my, intent that those people that have existing STRs within, like, say, the city of Henderson, like your district, they would be grandfathered in. So if there was something that was within, I don't know, like outside of these like requirements, let's say there were someone that was, I don't know, 300 feet from another STR, those two individuals would not lose their like registration and their ability to operate as an STR.
Okay, but just, so if someone is in unincorporated Clark County where it's not allowed, or another place where it's not allowed, they don't get to grandfather in?
No.
Okay, thank you. Okay, with that, we'll go to some other questions. Assemblyman Yeager?
Thank you so much, Madam Chair. Assemblywoman, good to see you. Thank you for working on this. I know how many meetings you've had, and I don't envy the meetings that still probably remain on this issue. I have a couple of questions about the conceptual amendment, just to kind of get your thought process and the intent on the record. And so the first one on the conceptual amendments listed, I think it's bullet point number 3. It's the one that talks about changing the public hearing requirement. So in the bill as drafted, it was a shall, and in the conceptual amendment, it is going to be a may. And I wondered what the philosophy or thought process was behind that.
Thank you. Rochelle Wynn for the record. Thank you, Assemblyman Yeager. My thought process in that actually came from talking with a lot of these local jurisdictions. And it also came from my personal experience. We were doing a project in our house where we needed to obtain a special use permit to do some construction on our house when my father-in-law was looking to move in. And we sat through 6.5 hours of short-term rental like hearings at the city of Las Vegas, because they were all like hearings in those circumstances. And as you'll see probably from some of the opposition and support testimony, this is a very loaded topic that brings out the passions in a lot of people, which I appreciate, and I think that just means that it's something that everyone cares about. So my thinking on doing that was in reaction to talking to some of these local jurisdictions to be able to give them the opportunity to have like processes in place that allow for ease of registration and ease of administration. But if they needed to or they wanted to handle like in a public forum, they would do that. I have had ongoing conversations about having community notification process for when people are approved for these short-term rentals. So that's still a part of an ongoing conversation to make sure that there is that appropriate community involvement in any of the, how this would play out.
Thank you for the second question, Madam Chair. And the second question I have is also about the conceptual amendment, and it would be on page 2. Really, it's the last main bullet point. So in the bill as drafted, in a couple of sections, it indicates that the Board of County Commission, in adopting the ordinance, would set the maximum, let me find the language, establish a maximum number of permits a person may hold. And then in your conceptual amendment, I see that you have language that an applicant could hold no more than 5 permits per entity, and wanted to know what your thought process was in limiting it to 5 rather than allowing the Board of County Commission to set the maximum.
Thank you. Rochelle Wynn, Assemblyman Yeager. My thought process on this is an interesting one, and I don't think a lot of people understood that this was going on. And I didn't know. When I started like reaching out to people about like some of the problem areas and the problems that we were having, I learned that there were like multinational like hotel chains that were coming in and under the brand of their multinational billion-dollar corporation, were coming in and purchasing hundreds of properties at a time under one entity. And instead of coming and opening up a hotel, franchising in a hotel, having local ownership, employing people to work in those rooms and clean those rooms and maintain those facilities, they were moving more towards this distributed hotel model where they were just placing them on platforms like Airbnb and Vrbo and HomeAway. And so this was at a curb. I think there is one of these companies that owns more than 250 properties in one area within our state. And I think as a Nevadan, I want to protect Nevadans not only from like homes, but also affordable housing, but also, when you hear about people talking about wanting to invest, we're talking about people that want to make some extra money, potentially like investing in short-term rentals. They want to have a home. They want to have another home. They want to have maybe 2 investment or 3 investment properties. And this does not fix that problem, but I think that it does curb it. If you have to incorporate for every 5 houses, like for example, with that scenario with 200 homes, that company wouldn't be able to just come in and incorporate 200 homes under one company. They would have to do that, obviously, 40 times. And I think that's a big enough hiccup that, not only would we get the revenue from our Secretary of State of them, like constantly redoing business licensing, but they would have to go through that process each time with whatever local jurisdiction that they lived in order to get that licensing or permit.
Thank you. Assemblyman Ortlicker?
Thank you, Chair. David Ortlicker, Assembly District 20, nearby Assembly District 10, and thank you for bringing this. So my question is about the distance separation from resorts of 2,500 feet. So I think I pretty clear on the rationale for the separation within residential neighborhoods and how it, you are looking for a certain residential atmosphere and the environment, and suddenly it changes. But I'm not as clear on the rationale. I understand why, if you're a resort, you don't like competition, but we let restaurants spring up nearby resort hotels, and that's competition for the in-house restaurants. So could you talk a little bit more about this?
Thank you. Rochelle Wynn, for the record. Thank you for that question, Assemblyman Ornlicker. There are certain districts, I think Assemblywoman Constantine would recognize that her district is very in close proximity and has a lot of casino workers that are working in that neighborhood. I think looking at some of the distance requirements that are in close proximity to our hotels and resorts that are either in our neighborhoods or on the Las Vegas Strip, I think it's important to recognize that we know that they have a proven success of being able to maintain some safety standards. We have our culinary workers that have, and our culinary union has worked really hard along with the Resort Association to make sure that there are sufficient worker protections in there. I think we do want to encourage our guests and our tourists to come into our state and go to those properties that we know are highly regulated, we know that they are safe, and we know that they have put in those protections for our guests that are traveling here. So that was my intent.
Can I just ask a follow-up? David Orntlicker again. So one question I would have is whether, though, at times when we have overflow, that this would actually just increase the number of people who come in and not really divert them from the highly regulated places.
I'm sorry, I'm not sure I quite understand your question. I'm sorry, Rochelle Wynn, for the record.
Well, it sounded like the concern is people will choose the less regulated place to stay rather than the better regulated place to stay in, and I see that. But it may be we just get more people. The same number of people stay in the regulated places, and just more people can come to Las Vegas because it's not as hard to find a place to stay. So we wouldn't be diverting it at all. We would just be expanding the pie.
Rochelle Wynn, for the record. I would love it, and I think all of our economy would love it if we ran out of places on the Strip. And I think some of the provisions that I put in there, especially when it came to multifamily dwellings, it's my intent to increase the ability to utilize and have STRs in those multifamily dwellings, like the high rises that are located close to the Strip. So even though they are within that 2,500 feet distance requirement, they're actually carved out. So there are certain places that you would be able to do. You would not be able to within single family residences, though, that were in that area. If that makes sense.
Okay, I have a question from Assemblywoman Bilbray Axelrod.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for bringing this bill. Some of my questions were answered by my fellow members of the committee, but and I remember this bill in 2017, and I was really excited for it because I really like Airbnb and Vrbo, and just, I think you can't put the genie back in the bottle, as they say. I'm looking at your amendment, and I think more than anything, I just kind of want to get on the record. Originally in the bill, it says the term for how long you can stay is period of less than 3 days, but then your amendment kind of changes that language to nights. So I'm just curious, and I know your intent is to have it 2 nights, so that would be kind of 3 days, right? So 3 days, 2 nights, so like a weekend, is that correct? That's the first part.
Thank you. Rochelle Wynn, for the record. My intent was to, again, I wanted to have some flexibility there. I know that there were suggestions at the beginning from some of the stakeholders that we have a 3-night minimum, so 4 days. But I know that the practicalities is a lot of people travel for just a weekend. And so it is a 2-night stay with a 3 days, 2 nights. So that was taking into consideration a lot of the different stakeholders and coming to like a happy place where everyone was uncomfortable. So that was kind of my intent there, in addition to kind of curving or putting some like, stops on the people that would want to rent a house for one night for a party.
Thank you. And if I may follow up, Chair? So thank you for that. And I've heard of them doing that. I know on January 6th in Washington, D.C., for example, Airbnb made a decision that they would not rent for just one night on that night. So my other question, and I think, once again, you dealt with this in your amendment. I'm looking at what section? I'm in the same section, Section 7. It's on page 4, line 4, and your original language had not more than 2 persons per room, including children, and I immediately went back to thinking of the days where my husband and I traveled and we had our little baby with us and had our little pack and play, and the 3 of us were in one room and, cozy little family. I'm just wondering, and I think you kind of dealt with this because sometimes rooms are, accommodate, they might have 2 sets of bunk beds or things like that. So can we just get that intent as well?
Yes, Rochelle Wynn for the record. Thank you, Assemblywoman Bilbray Axelrod. That was exactly my intent. When that language first came out, I was like, so what you're saying is if I go with my 2 kids and my husband, we would have to have 2 bedrooms. Whereas if I stayed in a hotel, I would only need 1 room. So the intent was to, use that flexibility. The maximum of 16 people that's in the conceptual amendment, that actually came from some of our discussions with Airbnb. On their platform, they don't allow more than 16 guests in any one of their properties that they have listed on there. And some of the suggestions that they made and that came from other stakeholders kind of made sense. And so that's how we came up with this: 4 occupants in the first bedroom, 2 in the additional bedrooms, to kind of make up for that like 16 person. And it's again to avoid, situations where, kids are like excluded. And we had gone through back and forth whether or not kids would be included or excluded or included in that number, recognizing that there's a lot of parents that travel with like their soccer team for tournaments or, baseball teams. And, there are unique situations where you would have quite a few like minors in the thing. And so we felt like at that 16, that was consistent with some of the industry standards.
I have a question from Assemblywoman Considine.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Assemblywoman, for bringing this bill. Like the other Assemblywoman said, sort of the genie's out of the bottle, so I know that we need to do something about this, but I do have a few questions. One of them is, and I don't know if you know, and this might be a question for legal, in the conceptual amendment, you have an applicant can hold no more than 5 permits per entity, and I'm assuming permits means units or houses. And if that's the case, I believe that if you have 5 or more units or properties, that you're required to get a property management license, or you have a property manager. So I didn't know if that means they would have to get 2.
Rochelle Wynn for the record. Recently this amendment came up to kind of clarify that. I think it does need further clarification, and I will definitely work with legal to make sure that we have some clarification in law with respect to property management and how that would work, to make sure that we're consistent with other areas of the NRS. So I'd be happy to talk to you more offline about how we can make sure that there's consistency amongst the different chapters of NRS for sure.
Thank you. And then also on the line with the permits, so homeowners associations can put in their regulations, in their rules, more restrictions or not allow STRs in the HOAs. Is that correct?
That is correct. Rochelle Wynn for the record, that is correct.
So in a situation where an entity applies for these permits, will whoever is checking for these permits find out if it is an HOA and determine whether or not the HOA allows it? Will that process be occurring?
Rochelle Wynn for the record. That is also another area that we are continually working on. There was some language to like how we would notify or how we would get notification from an HOA board that they are not allowed. So that is still a part of a dynamic process. We knew it was going to be probably burdensome to have to go to an HOA board, given some of the potential politics that take place on HOA boards in order to get a written letter saying, hey, you can have this or you can't have this. So we are looking at being able to look at like CCNRs that like lay out that. And so they may potentially have to like submit that with their application for their property.
Thank you. And then will the platforms, before they put a listing on their platform, will they be required to ensure that the applicant has a permit?
Rochelle Wynn for the record. That is something that we are also working on. We want to make sure that we understand that they will have to have, like, there are other, and I believe there is someone from Airbnb that they might be able to answer during their testimony in opposition. So, Chair, I'm sure they would be able to do that. I know that they do have the ability in some jurisdictions where they have to post like the business license or a permit license number. We just want to make sure that they are not held like liable if they're posting a number, like let's say, you know, a person puts on there, oh, here's my license number, and they stick it on there and it turns out it's a fraudulent number. Once they find out, obviously they can take it off. They're going to continue to collect taxes on that until they find out that it is not like a valid license. But I do know that most of the major platforms do already have the ability to post that kind of documentation on their websites.
Thank you. And Chair, if I may make one comment?
Go ahead.
Thank you. So as I said, I appreciate the need for this bill. My worry about this bill is that if homeowners associations can regulate them out of their neighborhoods, then there's a disproportionate impact on areas that don't have HOAs, which is anything in an older area of Henderson and in my district, which is Central Las Vegas, now becomes sort of more of a focused area for folks who want to get into this business. So I do hope, and I know that I believe there has been talk, but I don't know where that's going, that pairing that with our affordable housing problem that we have, especially in Clark County, that there is some sort of symbiosis between, if we're going to go forward with this, that this has some sort of benefit in paying in some way for affordable housing.
Thank you. Rochelle Wynn for the record. The affordable housing piece is like a big piece for me. Does this get us all the way there? No. Does it even like come close to solving any budget shortfalls that we have in, for example, funding the Affordable Housing Trust Fund in our state? I would love to, and I will continue to work with stakeholders going forward to see how we can make sure that it is. Part of the reason that we have some of these restrictive measures in here with the distance requirements within properties, permitting requirements, the number of permits that you can get, you know, the ability for open hearings and enforcement is to get at those communities like my own, like your own, where there aren't HOAs to necessarily protect people. On the flip side, I will tell you that there are some places, especially in the Tahoe area, where people have come in and taken over HOA boards and then specifically authorized like unlimited STRs within that. So, you know, there is a flip side to that affordability housing and investment things with the HOAs. So I feel like these give us some needed protections in those areas like my own and like your own in your district where they wouldn't have the protections of an HOA board to do so.
Thank you very much. I appreciate all of that. I just want to make sure that in my district where we have a lot of workers who work on the Strip are still able to afford to live in those areas and have the quiet enjoyment of those areas. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I think this is just another example that shows us how what Assemblywoman's been doing for the last few months was like her own interim committee on this, because there are so many different issues With that, we'll go to a question from Assemblywoman Kasama.
Thank you, Chair Cohen. If I may, I have two questions for Assemblywoman Nguyen. Thank you so much. This is such a difficult topic. It's private property rights on both sides. It's the private property rights of the person that already owns the home to rent it. It's the private property rights of the neighbor for quiet enjoyment. So it's a very delicate dance. And thank you for stepping up to work on this. It is critical for the state. Thank you for acknowledging, too, the difference between localities in our state and different issues that go with each jurisdiction, so that we're focusing on the big one now, Clark County. And so I have a couple questions here with back to the 5 permits per entity. My question has to do with the entity. Is there any consideration for common ownership between the entities? So you were talking about one entity could come in and create 40 entities, but if there's a common ownership thread between that entity, is there any thought or consideration for how that might work?
Rochelle Wynn for the record. Thank you, Assemblywoman Kasama, for the question and the comment. It is something that, like I said, I think our intention was to try to get away from this distributed hotel model where you had multinational, like multi-billion-dollar like corporations that were coming in doing that. I know I worked a lot with the realtors because I think there were some concerns that this wasn't like your average like investor. This was like a company that had like unlimited, honestly, unlimited resources to be able to come in and cash buy all of these things. So definitely I'm willing to work on that language to make sure that I get it right. I know that there were some suggestions from people to make it so you couldn't incorporate or you couldn't have an LLC. And the lawyer in me, I was like, anyone that had a rental property, whether it was a long-term rental property or short-term rental property, would have an incorporation. And I don't think that they should be prohibited from those protections just because it's a short-term rental and we're trying to curb that. So this was kind of me trying to get to a delicate balance with all the stakeholders on how we could curb that distributed hotel model, but also protect like individual investors or smaller investors.
Thank you. And Chair, if I may have the other question. So, and I did just get the conceptual amendment here a little bit before the hearing, but back to the section here on the first page of your conceptual amendment where it says short-term rentals approved, add a new section that short-term rentals approved by a local jurisdiction prior to the effective date of this bill are grandfathered in. My concern is, obviously, with unincorporated Clark County, where they haven't had regulations other than a ban. We have investors, hundreds, if not thousands, that have purchased homes there, and it is different than buying a bicycle and saying you can't use it anymore. That's a real impact to a lot of people that have done it. Whether it was good or not, how it started, perhaps that was a lack of having regulation earlier. But my concern would be that those people are not grandfathered in, and I just wanted to clarify that you're just saying for because the other municipalities in Clark County have had some regulations. So are you saying that unincorporated Clark County, anybody that owns one would be not grandfathered in and would have to start applying with all these? And I'm not quite sure how you're going to do that when people are 500 feet apart and they might own several in the same neighborhood.
Rochelle Wynn for the record. I think that's the delicate balance. You have a lot of people that, they're operating unlawfully. I mean, at the end of the day, I think they know they're operating unlawfully. They are actively operating unlawfully. I know that Clark County has struggled with these unauthorized, unlawful, like short-term rentals that are prolific throughout Clark County. They don't have a mechanism currently to be able to enforce or, regulate them. And so they are currently wreaking havoc. And yes, not all of them are party houses, but they are all acting unlawfully. It is my intent to make them go through the process like they would normally, because to become in compliance, this gives them an opportunity. And if Assembly Bill 363 passes, gives them the opportunity to do so lawfully. I talked to a lot of people and they were like, well, what about all these places? And I was like, right now they can't operate lawfully. At the end of the day, they're flouting the law at this point. So I do think that they would have to come into compliance and go through the process just like everyone else that wants to do so lawfully. I think that's part of the problem that I've seen in talking to people that own short-term rentals is the people that are trying to comply are, hurting, and they are being subject to fines and fees that sometimes they believe are unreasonable or unwarranted. And the people that are not registered, that are operating unlawfully, nothing happens to them. They're not paying taxes. They're not being regulated. We have no way of knowing how they are. So it is my intention that they would have to go through that same process as well.
And is there a time frame for them to come into compliance?
I will tell you, I don't have a time frame on here, but I do recognize that in making Clark County have to do this process, that I'm very flexible and open with how the implementation date would happen on the bill.
Thank you.
Assemblywoman Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, Chair Cohen, and thank you for the presentation, as well as all the work that you put into this. It's pretty extensive. I have two questions. The first, I believe, is a pretty straightforward one. I'm just verifying that there are no changes to the language that was proposed in Section 6, which basically adds this platform onto the transient lodging, as was discussed by the president of the Retail Association. So I'm just making sure that this has not changed at all. So this way, when the county commissioners decide to sit down and set up this ordinance, there will continue to be, or there will start to be, a tax that will be in fact collected, similar to what the hotel and resorts have to collect.
Rochelle Lynn, for the record. That's my intention, and I don't have any amendments regarding that section at this time.
Great, thank you, because I just wanted to verify that one. And then my second question is very similar to Assemblymember Considine's. When it's a concern, there needs to be some sort of checks and balance between the permits as well as the different housing platforms. Because it feels like, and I know that this is something that will be a discussion for further, it feels like the individuals who are owning the houses and have to be the ones to apply for the permits are the only ones that will, in fact, if something goes wrong, be held accountable, whether it's paying a fine, possibly having their permits pulled. So I'm just asking, no need for an answer at this time, but I am asking that the housing platforms or rental platforms also have some sort of a skin in the game to follow the rules as well, because I really appreciate, again, all the work that you've done. However, right now, looking at both the original language as well as the amended language, it feels like the homeowners are the only ones, or groups, are the only ones that are being held accountable, when the housing platforms are also very much a part of this discussion.
Thank you. Rochelle Lynn, for the record. Thank you for that comment and question, Assemblywoman Anderson. It's definitely something, like I said, this is a very dynamic process still. I'm thankful that I have the opportunity to meet with you, and you have all very wonderful, thoughtful questions, because I anticipate that a lot of these will be incorporated in any future amendments that come before any kind of work session that we may be fortunate enough to have in this committee.
Thank you, and thank you, Chair Cohen.
Assemblyman Hafen.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Assemblywoman, for working on this. I think that it's important to lift the ban and to open up the market. And I did get your conceptual amendment, and I appreciate that as well. And just looking at the conceptual amendment regarding the population of counties greater than 700,000 that this would apply to, is it your intent in the conceptual amendment to say that counties smaller than 700,000 cannot adopt rules and regulations, or would they be allowed to basically adopt whatever kind of rules and regulations they so choose would fit their communities?
Rochelle Wynn for the record. Obviously, the original bill, like my intent was to include all counties within the state of Nevada. Obviously, in talking with stakeholders and recognizing some of the unique challenges, in addition to places that have already imposed pretty substantial ordinances within their jurisdictions that they've been working on for years and years and years and years. I wanted to take that into consideration. And I've told those counties as well that they probably will see me again in the future. I don't see this, like I said, being the perfect bill, but it is my intention to allow them to continue with the regulations and ordinances that they currently have in play in most of those counties that are under that population cap. Again, I don't think there is such a thing as a perfect bill, and I imagine with this topic and given the number of conversations I have had so far, that I'm sure I will be back here in 2023 correcting and fine-tuning some of those things, as well as working on some of the concerns that I know we're not able to make it into this particular bill.
Thank you. And Madam Chair, can I have one follow-up? You mentioned that if the county had current ordinance, if a county does not have an ordinance, could they enact an ordinance regarding the short-term dwelling units?
Rochelle Wynn for the record. Obviously, if they were not included in here, they are able to do that under their own county and city charters as well.
Thank you for that. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Committee, do we have any other questions? Go ahead, Assemblywoman Kasama.
Thank you, Chair, for the indulgence. Heidi Kasama, Assembly District 2, and for Assemblywoman Wynn. I just wanted to clarify, too. I was looking in the original bill and I was looking in the conceptual amendment, but is it the intent that these short-term rentals will be considered a permissible residential use? So that there's no confusion with zoning on these, or?
Rochelle Wynn for the record. Honestly, that's not something I'm totally familiar with on the distinctions between it, but I'd be happy to talk to you about what the intent is and how that works as far as those legal definitions.
Wonderful, thank you.
Okay, and before we go on to support, I just have a couple more. The first one's more a statement. I appreciated bringing the pop cap in, but we do have places in Southern Nevada and Clark County that are rural and as Assemblyman O'Neill has said, if you make someone go 2,500 feet away from something, it's in a rural area, you can be in the sagebrush. Although I guess we don't have a lot of that in Southern Nevada, but you can be in the desert. So I guess I would just ask that you consider, if it's possible, to kind of consider the rural areas in Southern Nevada as you're continuing to proceed with this.
Rochelle Wynn for the record. It's definitely something that we have considered. I think that's why there were some distinctions. Initially, it was all non-restricted gaming, which would include all properties with 16 or more machines. So it include every Dottie's, Bourbon Street, PT's Pub, all of those things. So in our attempts to kind of narrow down what we were trying to accomplish, those are some of the things that we have continually kept trying to narrow it down to make sure that we're capturing and giving enough flexibility in those areas. But I will continue to work with those.
Thank you. And then, so my question then is about, in the amendment, the last bullet point, the section 11(1)A and Section 11(1)B, which are respectively on pages 6 and 7. The language that you've deleted, the and who on behalf of the owner, lessee, or other lawful occupant of the residential unit or manager of the residential unit collects the gross receipts from the rental of the residential unit or a room or space within the residential unit. Can you just address why that came out of those two paragraphs?
Thank you. Rochelle Wynn for the record. Some of these conceptual amendments and the deletion of those things came from speaking with some of the short-term rental platforms. They were in a position where they wanted to just be able to collect all of it, and if they later found out that it wasn't, they were still going to give it to the county to, so if they collected from what later turned out to be an unlawful, like unregistered, or fraudulent short-term rental, they didn't want to have to be held liable for the money that they already remitted to the county on collection of that.
Okay, thank you. And then, so one of the things that's in that section, and I think it's in another section as well, Section 12, there's also reference to not just rooms, but spaces, and is there a difference for tax collection or anything like that with this? What do we mean by spaces?
Rochelle Wynn for the record. I'm looking at Section 12. Do you know specifically what section you're speaking of, Chairwoman?
Sorry, I flipped pages a couple of times. Let me track it down. It is in the language in the page 6 and 7, Section 11(1)A and 11(1)B mentions it, but I do think it's somewhere else that I had noticed. Hold on.
Rochelle Wynn, for the record, I know exactly where you're looking. I'm not going to lie, that is weirdly worded, and it is something that we are also continuing to look on to make sure that it isn't like 25% within like a room, within a space, within a unit. So we are working on further clarifying that. It is something that was brought to my attention, and when I read it, I was like, I don't even know what this means. So it is definitely one of those things that we are continuing to define what that space looks like and how it is defined in statute.
Thank you. And I believe we have a question from Assemblyman O'Neill.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And just to clarify what I have been talking about, because I appreciate the PopCap amendment, I truly do. It solves so many problems for us here in the rurals. And I want Clark County to handle their own issues, but just for the record, I was thinking of places like Laughlin, where they have multiple unrestricted gaming locations, and Mesquite also, that half-mile distance would cause them some difficulties. So all what I would say is, and I think you've actually answered it, is I don't know if Laughlin is a township, what their status is, to be honest with you, but it's places like that I was concerned about.
Thank you for that question. Rochelle Wynn for the record, our question and comment. In looking at some of those things, I have worked pretty closely with NACO and their representatives, as well as the Resort Association, to see if there are any concerns. With the population cap, I haven't received much feedback that those are problematic areas within Clark County, but it is something that I will continue to work out and reach out to those various stakeholders to see if they have concerns. I can tell you in the various stakeholder meetings, I haven't had anyone have any concerns with those particular locations. More so in some of the other places that we were able to accommodate with this population cap.
Thank you. And I certainly wasn't attempting to impugn intent on Assemblyman O'Neill's statement. However, also Mr. Nakamoto has given us the answer that Laughlin is a town. So with that, seeing no other questions, we're going to move on. Oh, we have a question from Assemblywoman Anderson.
So sorry about that. Thank you, Chair Cohen. Thank you again. So I just started doing a little bit of research based upon some things that you were just saying during the discussion. Do you know how many complaints there have been about unpermitted complaints in Clark County, because there are some areas that do allow the permits. I believe it's in North Las Vegas. I could be off on that. But in the unincorporated Clark County area, do you have any idea about what that is? Or possibly when somebody from Clark County, I can also ask them that.
Rochelle Wynn for the record. I do not know that number, but I believe that Joanna Jacobs or someone from Clark County will probably be on the line either in support, opposition, or neutral regarding the bill. I will continue to work with them. In fact, that is one of the people that I will have continuing conversations about, especially on the enforcement pieces. I know that they have really struggled in talking not only with my commissioner, the best commissioner, obviously, Commissioner Seger-Bloom, but also the other members of the commission, as well as their lobbying government affairs team, on how we can do that. I've met with their enforcement people. They are clearly underfunded, I should say, and they are lacking some of the resources and information. Hopefully some of the data collection pieces in here from the sites will help also facilitate that. And what I've found in looking at some of the other jurisdictions that I've gone to, honestly, less restrictive means, you actually get more participation and you get more information about who is out there operating. And that's kind of the intent that I'm hoping this bill will accomplish.
Okay, and with that, we are going to move on to support. We are going to be timing support, opposition, neutral. So Mr. Nakamoto and I will both be doing it to make sure we don't mess it up. It will be up to 45 minutes total for each, 2 minutes per person. So with that, I don't think we have anyone in support on the Zoom. But if okay. Go ahead, Ms. Valentine, and then if there's anyone else, please let me know. But I believe the rest are either in neutral or opposition. So please go ahead. Oh, I'm sorry, you're not Ms. Valentine. Pam, please go ahead.
Teresa McKee, for the record, I'm assuming you're talking about me. Thank you very much,
Sorry, Ms. McKee.
Madam Chair, members of the committee. My name is Teresa McKee. I'm CEO for Nevada Realtors, and I'm here to testify in support of the conceptual amendment brought forward by Assemblywoman Wynn. We greatly appreciate her taking the time to meet with us and take our concerns into consideration. The Realtors fundamentally believe that property rights allow for a person to buy, sell, or rent her home or his home, along with the proper permitting and enforcement of the regulations surrounding that. These private property rights should be protected, and we've heard enough testimony talking about how much easier it is to make a short-term rental out of your residence, and that it's very, very important and a really hard balance to strike between a full-time resident's quality of life in their own neighborhood versus the ability to rent a property as a short-term rental. And the Realtors also recognize that there are vast differences between Southern Nevada and the Lake Tahoe Basin, especially in trying to find that balance. So we appreciate the inclusion of the population caps so that the bill only applies to Clark County. The Realtors, along with many others, have put in a ton of time and effort into working with Washoe County on recently passing their ordinance to address short-term rentals. And we really want to give that time and see how that implementation goes. And hopefully we'll all learn about some things that work and maybe some things that don't work as well. The grandfathering of current short-term rentals does allow current owners to continue to rent their property legally. Many short-term rentals are second homes, and this gives families the flexibility to have a vacation home and continue to pay the mortgage. We also would be in complete support with any provisions that validate that a property used as a short-term rental is a permissible residential use and not a commercial use. We have that understanding that this is included in the bill and or the amendment, and we'll look forward to working with Assemblywoman Wynn to ensure that that is the case. Eventually, we would like to see a long-term plan that addresses the short-term rentals statewide. We will continue to stay at the table and work with Assemblywoman Wynn on finding a solution that works for all of our local jurisdictions. We do appreciate the opportunity to testify in support of AB 363 as amended. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. McKee. I don't believe we have anyone else on the Zoom. Do we have anyone in the room who is testifying in support? Please go ahead, Mr. Irvin.
Thank you. Good late afternoon, committee members and chair. Kent Irvin, K-E-N-T-E-R-V-I-N, for the Nevada Faculty Alliance, the statewide association of faculty at NC colleges and universities statewide. We support this bill. We generally support revenue measures. Our economists that have certain characteristics, our economist colleagues tell us that the best revenue taxes are broad and low. And this is an example of the kind of bill that extends taxes to a sector of the economy that's similar to other sector of economies that are taxed, but expands it to, based on new technology and new ways of doing business, just expands it to a broader economic base. And we think that's important. And so we support this revenue as part of the Revenue Coalition. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have anyone else in the room? Okay, seeing none. BPS, can we please go to the phones?
Yes, Chair. To testify in support on Assembly Bill 363, please press *9 now to take your place in the queue. Again, if you would like to provide testimony in support for Assembly Bill 363, please press *9 now to take your place in the queue. One moment, Chair. Will the caller with the last three digits, 577, please slowly state and spell your name for the record? You'll have 2 minutes and may begin now.
Hello, Chris Daly, D-A-L-Y, Nevada State Education Association, the voice of Nevada educators for over 120 years. NSCA supports AB 363 to ensure short-term rentals are subject to taxes on transient lodging and to require facilitators like Airbnb or VRBO to collect and remit required taxes. In February and again on Monday of this week, educators in red convened in Carson City, lining the street and lobbying in this building, asking you to dig deep to address our budget challenges. After sustaining difficult cuts in the 31st special session last summer, K-12 public education is threatened this session with difficult general fund cuts. This includes a proposed $33 million cut to the Read by Grade 3 program, which provides critical early literacy supports, and $156 million in proposed cuts to class size reduction, despite already having the largest class sizes in the nation. Emergency assistance from the American Rescue Plan will certainly help schools address pandemic-related issues, but these funds are one-time and will expire in 2023. Ranking near the bottom of states and purposeful funding, Nevada's public schools and other vital services deserve new and sustained revenue, not just continued austerity. Meanwhile, the rapid growth of short-term rentals has not only impacted communities and housing affordability, it also has gone largely unregulated with significant tax avoidance and evasion. AB 363 brings these necessary regulations while also providing the state with much-needed revenue by requiring facilitators of short-term rentals to collect and remit those taxes. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next person on the phones in support, please.
Caller with the last three digits, 419. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You have 2 minutes.
Thank you, Chair Cohen and members of the committee. For the record, my name is Benjamin Challinor. That's BenjaminChallinor. I am the Policy Director for Faith in Action Nevada, and we are here in support for AB 363. We'd like to thank Assemblywoman Nguyen for bringing this bill forward with bipartisan and broad-based support. This bill will look to bring parity with short-term rentals, both in regulation and in taxation. As many of you know, our state is experiencing a housing crisis caused by housing shortage. Because housing demand is pretty inelastic, meaning people's demand for housing doesn't decline when prices increase, even small changes in housing stock, like those caused by converting long-term rental properties to short-term rentals, can cause significant price increases. We are encouraged by the sponsor's willingness and actively trying to find a solution to the affordable housing issue with this bill. To echo the sentiments as others have stated from the revenue aspect, by also taxing short-term rentals the same as traditional hotels, we will also be bringing revenue that is currently being left on the table. Revenue that is severely needed both by our state and local governments. Thank you for the opportunity to speak on this bill, and we urge your support for AB 363.
Thank you. Next person on the phone in support, please.
Will the caller with the last three digits, 602, please slowly state and spell your name? You have 2 minutes and may begin.
Good evening, Assembly members of the Committee on Revenue and Chair Cohen. For the record, my name is Eddie Ablesser, Eddie-Ablesser. And for the record, I'm representing the Incline Village General Improvement District. Let me start off by stating that Incline Village General Improvement District, politely known as IVGID, has no formal administrative jurisdiction on this issue. But instead, tonight, we are speaking on behalf of many residents and the community members of IVGID and how short-term rentals affect our neighborhood and our community as a whole. Residents and visitors to Incline Village have seen just how significant transient lodging has on our community. From parking issues, increased litter and trash, and the new problem of noise within what was normally quiet neighborhoods, these short-term rentals have had a very large impact on Incline Village as a whole. Within our community, one of our smaller communities has roughly 40% short-term rentals and is going unregulated. We'd like to commend Assemblywoman Nguyen on her leadership of this issue, lend our support for Assembly Bill 363 to assist in providing common sense regulation that will not infringe on private property rights, but ensure that communities like Incline Village are preserved. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Next person on the phones in support, please.
Will the caller with the last three digits, 014, please slowly state and spell your name? You have 2 minutes and may begin now.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and members of the committee. My name is Russell Rowe, R-O-W-E, speaking on behalf of Boyd Gaming Corporation in support of AB 363. I would first like to thank the sponsor, Assemblywoman Nguyen, for bringing this bill. We have received the conceptual amendment and believe it includes good changes, and we look forward to continue working with the sponsor. Boyd Gaming operates in all 4 local jurisdictions in the Las Vegas Valley: Clark County, City of Las Vegas, North Las Vegas, and Henderson. Over the past couple of years, we have been very involved as many of these jurisdictions have worked to create ordinances to regulate STRs. What we learned through that process is that there was a need for consistent minimum standards for the enforcement and regulation of short-term rentals. While we may be familiar with the local jurisdictional boundaries within Nevada, tourists, and in some cases, STR hosts, likely don't know if they are in a municipality or unincorporated Clark County, and therefore do not know the specific requirements related to STRs where they are staying. AB 363 will ensure that there is a level playing field across jurisdictions to ensure that Nevada remains a safe and welcoming tourism destination, protects residential neighborhoods, communities, and affordable housing, and fairly requires STRs to pay the transient lodging tax, just like our resort hotels do. The provisions set forth in AB 363 are aimed at protecting tourists and residents alike by requiring that STRs obtain a local jurisdiction permit and state business license to operate, and that information is clearly listed on any advertisement for the STR, as well as displayed in the unit itself. Additionally, the bill requires that STRs are subject to health and safety oversight from the local health authority and includes restrictions such as occupancy limits and minimum night stays to prevent so-called party houses that are disruptive to neighborhoods and communities.
Mr. Rowe, we're at 2
The bill
minutes, so
also
can you wrap up,
includes
please?
Yes, thank you so much. The bill includes important distance separation requirements to protect neighborhoods. We highly support this legislation. It's important to our tourism destination and to the neighborhoods in the Las Vegas Valley. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Next person in support, please.
Will the caller with the last three digits, 245, please slowly state and spell your name? You have 2 minutes and may begin now.
Thank you, Chair Cohen and members of the Assembly Revenue Committee, and thank you to Assemblywoman Nguyen for bringing this bill forward. My name is Alyssa Nave Worth, and I'm here today on behalf of Red Rock Resorts in support of AB 363 and the policy goals behind the legislation, which we believe strongly will establish a proper and consistent regulatory framework for Southern Nevada's short-term rental industry. This legislation does not seek to ban short-term rentals. Rather, it's the opposite. It allows short-term rentals to exist, but places new requirements so that those rentals can coexist with our residents and the resort community in a way that ensures fairness, parity, and limits the growth of an industry to protect our community and our neighborhoods. No longer is the short-term rental industry strictly represented by the individual homeowner who seeks to lease their home for a weekend or extended time period while they are out of town to earn some extra income. Today, many short-term rentals are owned by corporations and or investors who purchase mostly entry-level homes. They remove these homes from the market and list them as a short-term rental to Las Vegas's leisure and business travelers. With multiple homes for short-term lease, they operate like a hotelier. They're not held to the same standards as the resort hotel industry and certainly do not create the same level of jobs as our largest industry in the state. It is for these reasons and more that we respectfully request you support this measure.
Thank you. Next person in support, please.
If you have recently joined this meeting and would like to provide testimony in support of Assembly Bill 363, please press *9 now to take your place in the queue. Will the caller with the last three digits, 945, please slowly state and spell your name? You have 2 minutes and may begin.
Good evening. My name is Shaohua Yan, SHAOHUAYANG, and I'm just an individual. So I own an Airbnb property in Douglas County, and I have been having started this since last November. And since then, I have had no issue of party noise because we screen the guest. So I really appreciate that this bill is being considered as we hosts of Airbnb are not really demons, and we don't necessarily interrupt the community. There just needs to be measures taken into place and make sure that we have limited number of guests and we don't interrupt parking on neighbors and noise, produce too much noise. So the solution is really to regulate and make sure that everybody behave and in a respectful way to the community as well as neighbors. So this bill will create a good, positive environment so that everybody know their role and produce tax revenue to our counties. And also we help each other in terms of getting all the legal status, because in the past it's kind of gray area what we could do and what we couldn't, and there are also a lot of debate or argument on the social media, and people argue against each other. So this bill will hopefully bring a closure and unity into our community, and also respect and mutual benefit. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Next person in support, please.
If you have recently joined this meeting and would like to provide testimony in support of Assembly Bill 363, please press *9 now to take your place in the queue. Will the caller with the last three digits, 319, please at least state and spell your name? You have 2 minutes and may begin now.
Yes. Hi, my name is Rachel Hopper. However, I'm not in support of this bill. I'm in opposition. Would you like me to speak now or later?
No, please, later.
Thank you.
Next person, please.
One moment, Chair. Will the caller with the last three digits, 319, please slowly state and spell your name? You have, You have 2 minutes and may begin. One moment, Chair. Will the caller with the last three digits, 194, please slowly state and spell your name? You have 2 minutes and may begin now.
My name is Rhonda Tyser, RONDA I'm co-chairperson of the Incline Village Short-Term Rental Citizen Advisory Group. We support the bill, but we oppose the amendment putting a cap on county population so that Washoe County is not included. The current Washoe County ordinance does not protect our neighborhoods or our community at Lake Tahoe. After 2 years of pleading with the county, we still have no limits on numbers or locations of STRs throughout our Lake Tahoe community. We were ignored for 2 years while Airbnb and realtors were allowed to influence the ordinance. These stakeholders were given priority over residents. Stakeholders is a fuzzy word, and all stakeholders are not equal. The phrase we often hear that legislation must be right because all opposing groups are equally dissatisfied with it is overused and wrongly indicates that all opposing groups should have equal say, that all groups are equal in importance, and that is simply not true in the greater scheme of things. The most important voices are those that are the most informed and interested in preserving the values that the legislation is intended to uphold. I believe local full-time voting constituents' voices should be the loudest in determining what's included in AB 363. And this bill should not give people running businesses priority over citizens trying to preserve the community. Businesses will fail when the communities fail. Already, Incline has lost most of its affordable housing. Just this week, I helped a computer tech move from Incline to Reno because there is no affordable housing left. He's lived here 40 years, and he's now unable to find a single place to live. And he is not an isolated person. Go on the local Incline
you're
forum
at 2
next
minutes,
door.
so I'm going to ask you to wrap it up.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Our employees are leaving. Thank you.
And we're also going to categorize your testimony as opposition, and I'll remind anyone else who's waiting to testify. If you're going to testify in support, you're testifying in support of the bill with the amendment. So please testify accordingly. With that, we'll move on to the next person in support, please.
If you have recently joined this meeting and would like to provide testimony in support of Assembly Bill 363, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Again, if you would like to provide testimony in support only of Assembly Bill 363, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Chair, the line is open and working. However, we have one caller now. Will the caller with the last 3 digits, 112, please at least state and spell your name for the record. You have 2 minutes and may begin now.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. I'm Patrick Cates, that's C-A-T-E-S. I am the Douglas County Manager. Thank you for the opportunity to address AB 363. Douglas County includes the Tahoe Township, which encompasses the southeast portion of the Tahoe Basin from State Line, Nevada to Spooner Lake State Park. Short-term rentals have been part of the tourist economy in the Tahoe Basin for decades, and Douglas County may have one of the oldest short-term rental programs in the state, managing them by ordinance since 2005. For the last 3 years, we've been working on a major update to our ordinance, including 24 public meetings. We have added enforcement resources and stood up a new platform. We are nearly done with this process, and our commission will have their first reading of our new ordinance next week. We currently have approximately 600 permitted SCRs generating over $3 million per year in room tax revenue. The Douglas County Board of Commissioners voted to oppose AB 363 as introduced. Douglas County's concerns were with the level of specificity of requirements, particularly where they conflicted with our own ordinance. Douglas County proposed an amendment, which is included in your support material. It would differentiate between rural and urban counties and seeks to remove provisions for rules that conflicted with our own ordinance. However, given Assemblywoman Nguyen's conceptual amendment, Douglas County would wholeheartedly support the population provision that makes AB 363 apply only to Clark County. I want to thank Assemblywoman Nguyen for working with us and the many other stakeholders in the last couple of weeks. STRs are a complicated topic that often involves strong passion among the public with widely divergent views. I respect her courage for taking this on. She has been open and willing to consider changes to the language and to make it workable for Douglas and the other stakeholders. I think that's reflected in her conceptual amendment. While I still need to bring this back to my Board of Commissioners, I'm confident Douglas County will support women's conceptual amendment.
Sorry, sir. That's 2 minutes. If you can wrap it up, please.
I'm done. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else in support?
Yes, Chair. If you have recently joined this meeting and would like to provide testimony in support of Assembly Bill 363, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. To testify in support, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Caller with the last 3 digits 490, please press star 6 to unmute. Chair, I do not know what the complications would be, but I am not able to get through to this caller. Would you like me to move forward?
Please do, and then we'll just ask that person if they do call back, and I will accommodate them. But please go ahead.
Chair, that was the last caller that we had in support of Assembly Bill 363. If you would like to testify in opposition to Assembly Bill 363.
We're actually going to go to the Zoom first, and then the room, and then we'll go to the phones.
Oh,
okay.
My apologies, Chair.
No problem. Thank you. Okay, so we are, as I said, we're going to go to the Zoom, and I believe we have, let's start with Mr. Thong Savant from Airbnb. If you'd please go ahead, and then committee, if there are any questions for him. I'm going to volunteer you, sir, so please go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. I appreciate it. Good afternoon, Chair Cohen and members of the committee. My name is Adam Thompson, and I serve on Airbnb's public policy team. I'd like to thank Assemblymember Nguyen for her hard work on AB 363 and for diligently engaging a wide range of stakeholders on the bill. We recognize this is a complex issue, attracting the attention and feedback of many parties. And we applaud Assemblymember Nguyen for her effort to forge a balanced path forward to ensure short-term rentals can continue to serve local economies while bolstering Nevada's economic recovery at large. We believe the proposed conceptual amendments from the Assemblywoman offer a fair and balanced approach for Nevada's current short-term rental regulatory environment. However, we would like to raise additional items for the committee's consideration. As proposed, AB 363 would legalize short-term rentals in Southern Nevada and create a simple way for our community to pay their fair share of Transient Lodging Tax, which generates millions of dollars of revenue for Nevada each year. As an example, in Washoe County, in the past 5 years, we've collected and remitted an estimated $7.6 million in tax. As part of our efforts to be good partners to the state and local governments and communities we serve, we respectfully ask the committee to consider substantive changes to the 2,500-foot gaming buffer from short-term rentals, 500-foot distance requirements between short-term rentals, and eliminating the 2-night minimum for non-owner-occupied stays. We are coming off the heels of a once-in-a-century pandemic that has devastated the travel and tourism industry. Now is the time to help draw visitors to Nevada in a safe and healthy manner. We look forward to working with Assemblymember Nguyen and other members of the state and local leadership to ensure Airbnb and our host community are partners to Nevada's growth and economic recovery. Thank you for the consideration of our comments. We look forward to continued engagement on this bill.
Thank you. And I do have one question. So I believe that Airbnb has collected tax in Washoe, but not in Clark or the other counties. Can you explain why that is and how that came about?
Sure, I'm happy to address that, Chair. In March of 2016, we entered what we call a VCA, Voluntary Collection Agreement, with the County of Washoe, including Reno and Sparks. That program has since blossomed to 29,000 jurisdictions across the globe. As of September 2020, I believe we have collected upwards of $2.6 billion. And so we're supportive of Assemblymember Wynn's amendment to ensure that there's tax parity here and that we can help our community collect this tax that we know is so vital to local and state government.
Thank you. Seeing no questions, we will move to the next person in opposition on Zoom. See who that is. Do we have anyone else in opposition on Zoom? Raise your hand. I am not seeing anyone else, but I'm not seeing everyone. Okay. Let me just check the list. Okay, seeing no one else in opposition on the Zoom, is there anyone in opposition in the room?
Thank you, Chair and members of the committee. Marcos Lopez, Legislative Liaison, Americans for Prosperity, Nevada. First, I want to start off by saying that I hope the Assemblywoman knows that I have great respect and reverence for her for taking up this issue, a very complicated issue that we've been involved in since 2018, both at local municipalities, Washoe and in Clark County, City of Henderson, North Las Vegas, and the City of Las Vegas. We believe the amendment is a step in the right direction. We'd like to see further changes, but our real concerns is in these distance separations. I think this is a textbook example of anti-competitive protectionist regulatory captures by certain industries, in particular Boyd Gaming and Station Casinos. We know that they are very much against STRs and the Airbnb community and operators. We respectfully ask the sponsor to remove these distance separation requirements and the minimum night requirement. Short-term renting has long offered Nevada residents the opportunity to make some extra money for themselves and their families. It's been an important source for income for many Nevadans of all walks of life looking to share in our state's robust tourism and gig economy. In its current form, AB 363 is the government dictating who you can have in your home, how many nights you can have someone in your home, in order to protect corporations over average Nevadans. We strongly believe that STRs need to be treated in the same manner as long-term renting. The activities that occur in short-term rentals are the same as the activities that occur in long-term rentals. These are not hotels. They do not have concierge service. They do not have restaurants. They do not have entertainment. They do not have physical security. They don't have amenities on sites. The activities that occur in short-term rentals are fundamentally not any different than the activities that occur in long-term rentals. We've engaged in this issue since 2018, and we really want to get to a position of neutral because we understand that there are many individuals who are being hit with $1,000 fines retroactively and cumulatively that they cannot afford. And with the threat of SB 57, which is threatening to remove people from their homes for these unpaid fees, we really significantly want to get to a position of neutral because we want to make sure that these individuals are protected, and we fundamentally believe in people. And we urge progressives who oppose corporatism and conservatives who support property rights to be united in opposing this bill as currently written. On behalf of 96,000 activists in our organization, we urge to oppose AB 363.
Thank you. Do I have anyone else in the room in opposition? Nope. Okay, we're now going to go to the phones. As a reminder, we are allocating 45 minutes. We've already begun with that, so if BPS can please give us the next person on the phone.
If you have recently joined this meeting and would like to provide testimony in opposition to Assembly Bill 363, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. With a caller with the last 3 digits, 490, please slowly state and spell your name. Have 2 minutes and may begin now.
Thank you very much. Good evening. My name is Cyrus Hojati, C-Y-R-U-S, H-O-J-J-A-T-Y. Bottom line, I see this as against private property rights. It's pretty obvious. The casino establishments are losing a lot of their business to other parties. It is their responsibility to make their properties more attractive because they have been instituting resort fees, paid parking, their service has come down. This is a threat. It brings unacceptable competition to their establishment. And this really further proves that Nevada is really a merger of state and corporate powers, particularly casinos, along with the phony labor unions that they're tied with. Now, yes, there are concerns with party houses. I do believe that there are other measures that can be taken to strike them down. But I don't think that casinos should have power on what people should put on their property. That is a decision to local authorities. And yes, I understand that tax revenues can help, but I fear that if tax rates are so high that it may discourage people from using them. I think that improved zoning and codes can really do the thing. I think this will also create an opportunity for the black market where people will just post things on other sites like Craigslist. Also, Airbnb provides lower cost competition to the rental market. When I was going in between housing units, I used Airbnb to find an appropriate apartment. Bottom line, I also see this as a one-size-fits-all approach throughout the state. Every city and county is certainly different. Bottom line is that I see this as nothing more but casino power to outstrip the competition. And it further proves my largest concern I have in the state of Nevada. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Next person in opposition, please.
Will the caller with the last three digits, 705, please slowly state and spell your name. You have 2 minutes and may begin now.
Good afternoon, Chair Cohen and members of the committee. My name is Robert Callahan, C-A-L-L-A-H-A-N. I'm with the Internet Association. The Internet Association represents more than 40 of the world's leading Internet companies, and we advance public policy solutions that foster innovation, promote economic growth, and empower people through the free and open Internet. We respectfully oppose AB 363 due to its provisions that would act as a de facto ban on many short-term rentals in Nevada. While we appreciate that there has been some progress made with the recent amendments, we still have serious concerns over the ban on short-term rentals within 500 feet of one another, as well as the 2-night minimum requirement. These limitations are overbroad and would prohibit a significant volume of legitimate short-term rental activity in Nevada. Short-term rentals create an opportunity for homeowners to supplement their income and stimulate business growth in neighborhoods previously untouched by tourism. They also offer more affordable and flexible options for guests, create new demand for tourism and travel, and bring tens of millions of dollars to local communities. This adds to the vibrancy of local communities beyond the typical tourism districts, and new visitors to these neighborhoods bring unprecedented economic stimulus. This means more customers for Main Street shops and locally owned businesses that tourists normally wouldn't have the opportunity to visit. So for these reasons, we remain opposed to the bill and urge the removal of the proximity restrictions and the two-night minimum. Thanks for your consideration.
Thank you. Next person in opposition, please.
Will the caller with the last three digits, 735, please slowly state and spell your name. You have 2 minutes and may begin now.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and members of the committee. For the record, Justin Harrison, Justin Harrison, representing Clark County. We're here today in opposition to the bill as written. However, I do want to thank Assemblywoman Wynn for including us in her working groups, and we look forward to continuing to discuss further amendments to the bill. I was able to review the proposed conceptual amendment shortly before the hearing, and some of our primary concerns include the proposed population cap, as well as the lack of enforcement provisions in the bill. By mandating provisions only in counties with a population over 700,000, you create inequity. Most counties will have the flexibility in drafting their ordinances concerning STRs, and one will not. We know each local jurisdiction, even those in Clark County, have unique characteristics and believe the prescriptive provisions found in the bill will not allow all jurisdictions the flexibility to determine the best public policy for matters of local concern in their individual communities. I appreciate Assemblywoman Wynn mentioning continuing to address enforcement. However, the lack of enforcement provisions in the bill do not provide local jurisdictions who are charged with enforcement the tools to gain compliance over properties operating both legally and illegally. It's our hope to see dual-track enforcement provisions, one for properties operating with a permit or license and those operating without. Constituents in our community are asking for stronger enforcement. Additionally, you'll see posted to notice that Clark County has filed a $3.8 million fiscal note on the bill over the biennium and a $3.5 million note over the future biennia. This is the cost we anticipate based on our best assessment of how many STRs may be operating or begin operating in unincorporated Clark County. With that, Madam Chair, I will wrap up, but at your direction, I also have Jim Anderson with Clark County Code Enforcement, who is signed in to provide neutral testimony that includes current statistics and to answer Assemblywoman Anderson's questions and any others that the committee may have. Thank you so much.
Thank you. We appreciate that. We'll have him testify in neutral when we get there. So with that, we will go to the next person in opposition, please.
For the caller with the last three digits, 809, please slowly state and spell your name. You will have 2 minutes and may begin now.
My name is Melissa Cassidy, Cassidy, and I'm opposed to this bill as it is written currently with the amendments. I started hosting on Airbnb 4 years ago and had accumulated over 1,000 bookings. Not one time was there an incident with police or my neighbors. I have hosted and introduced our city to people from over 45 countries. Being an Airbnb host has allowed me financial freedom without working myself to death as I was doing. I have been a culinary bartender and food server for over 21 years. I was working on multiple properties, oftentimes working double shifts of 12 to 16 hours a day. I love my job, but I needed to find another source of income to lighten the toll on my body. Being a host has allowed me to take shorter shifts and less shifts in a week. Hosting allowed me to focus those energies on improving my home for visitors. Those desires allowed me to employ friends and professionals from across Las Vegas. All of that is written in past tense as it came to a halt in January when I was reported to code enforcement by a bitter neighbor with a personal grudge unrelated to hosting. Being shut down is unreasonable as I host in my home I live in. I do not throw parties. My home is not loud or disruptive to my neighbors. If it was, I wouldn't have been able to do this business successfully for 4 years. There are all kinds of travelers. Let's keep up with the world and provide them all kinds of options in Vegas. I miss hosting. I miss my guests. I urge you to make Airbnb legal, but without the proposed arbitrary distance restrictions. The distance restrictions from STR to casinos is arbitrary and eliminates 29 million square feet of voters' private properties as short-term rentals. The proposed distance between short-term rentals is also arbitrary. There's less than 200 police reports about Airbnb. Many speakers have overemphasized the problem at Airbnb to date. The proposed 2 or 3 day minimum effectively prohibits STR's ability to host thousands of stays. We are a pass-through state to national parks on either side of us in our adjacent states, and guests often wish to stay one day. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Next person in opposition, please.
One moment, Chair. Will the caller with the last 3 digits, 373, please slowly state and spell your name. You have 2 minutes and may begin.
Hello, my name is Maleesimson, Maleesimpson. I am currently an SCR operator in Henderson, and I have been a long-term resident of Las Vegas, Clark County, over 40 years. I've raised 4 kids here. I appreciate this bill, and although I'm opposed, it's because of some of the provisions, mainly the distance rule, and the reason why I will tell you has personally affected my ability to earn income through my rental property. I purchased a property in Henderson that was blocked by another property because of their 1,000-foot distance rule. So I was not able to use mine for a short-term rental, even though it was already set up and ready to be used that way. So I think, and I appreciate all that has went into this bill, but I do think the distance rule is the main issue here, because I see that it's going to pit neighbor against neighbor, and it's also going to put those houses that are available in the circles that Henderson has now, and those houses are going to be the prices of the house that can do it and the one that can't. It's going to be a huge difference. So I think the distance rule is something that I definitely oppose, and that's from my own personal experience. Thank you.
Thank you. Next person in support, please. Sorry, next person in opposition, please.
Well, the caller with the last three digits, 542, please slowly state and spell your name. You have 2 minutes and may begin.
My name is Jeff Rogan, Rogan, and I'm from Las Vegas. Chair Cohen and members of the Assembly Revenue Committee, I want to comment that I support short-term rentals and I'm support of assessing the transient lodging tax upon short-term rentals, but I oppose the remainder of this bill and the conceptual amendment as it usurps the authority of our local communities to regulate and control what is at heart a local issue. I have personal experience with the short-term rentals in 3 respects. I've been the president of our local neighborhood association near downtown Las Vegas. I'm also a member currently of the City of Las Vegas Planning Commissioner, and I also use short-term rentals occasionally here in Nevada and elsewhere. From these personal experiences, I can advise you that while short-term rentals are popular, the issue of short-term rentals operating in residential neighborhoods evokes a visceral and emotional response from neighbors. In other words, if there's a third rail of local land use issues in Nevada, it is the issue of short-term rentals. Given the disproportionate impact that this bill will have on our neighborhoods in Clark County that are not governed by an HOA, I urge you to act carefully with deliberation, and most importantly, I ask you to seek input from those citizens from communities like mine that have struggled with short-term rentals over the past several years. With regard to the specifics of the bill, I applaud the Assembly for tackling the transient lodging tax issue that unfairly exempts short-term rentals from taxes that other similar businesses are obliged to pay. As to the remainder of the bill and conceptual amendment, I would make 3 requests. First, any state law governing short-term rentals must allow local communities the discretion of whom to license and what regulations should be imposed on the operation of short-term rentals. For example, the City of Las Vegas determined that an appropriate distance separation between short-term rentals is 660 feet, whereas the City of Henderson requires 1,000 feet. Second, this bill lacks a workable enforcement mechanism. I would ask that you listen carefully to our local leaders and include, in whatever form they advise, a civil mechanism of enforcement that will weed out bad operators from our neighborhoods.
Sir, and we're
finally,
at 2 minutes, so if you could wrap it up, please.
Thank you. I would also just urge you not to eliminate public input prior to licensing of STRs. Thank you for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you for your public testimony. With that, we will go to the next person in opposition.
One moment, Chair. Will the caller with the last 3 digits, 894, please slowly state and spell your name. You have 2 minutes and may begin.
Jacqueline Flores, JACQUELINE FLORES. I'm the founder of the Greater Las Vegas Short-Term Rental Association. Good afternoon, Chair Cohen and members of the Assembly Committee on Revenue. The Greater Las Vegas Short-Term Rental Association is the largest and most influential organization representing short-term rental owners and operators across Nevada, and especially in Southern Nevada, where thousands of our members operate their STRs without any issues. We sincerely appreciate Assemblywoman Rochelle Nguyen's interest in short-term rentals and commend her on keeping the lines of communication open. Unfortunately, the Greater Las Vegas Short-Term Rental Association cannot support AB 363 in its current form. More than anyone here today, we would like to see the statewide legalization of short-term rentals. However, many of the provisions in the bill, especially distance separation, among other things, keep us from being able to endorse this legislation as good for short-term rental operators. A whole magnitude of people benefit from STRs, empty nesters, retired senior citizens on a fixed income, people that have lost their jobs due to COVID-19, parents trying to help put their children through college, homeowners that have been saddled with high medical bills or struggling to pay their mortgage, sons and daughters trying to take care of their elderly parents, among others. I don't think we are ready to tell any of those families we can support a bill that will take away their ability to take care of their families. We have an opportunity to benefit the state and an individual Nevada from a new, growing, and thriving industry that is the short-term rental industry. And instead of limiting its growth and benefits to a few, we should be doing everything in our power to protect and grow it for the benefit of all in our state. Thank you.
Thank you. Next person in opposition, please.
Will the caller with the last three digits, 910, please solely state and spell your name? You have 2 minutes and may begin now.
Hello, my name is Brittany Walker, BrittanyWalker. I'm here in opposition to Assembly Bill 363, representing Boulder City, Nevada. Boulder City is really grateful to the sponsors for bringing this bill forward, and Assemblywoman Nguyen for working so hard with stakeholders on addressing the issue. Boulder City overall is supportive of the concept, and thanks Assemblywoman Nguyen for trying to address this challenging and complex problem that local governments face. However, we are in opposition due to Section 20, subsection 3, which prohibits local governments from enacting a regulation that would prohibit the operation of short-term rentals in their jurisdictions. We believe that this is a local issue and it should be up to the local jurisdictions to determine whether short-term rentals are appropriate. We're a population of 16,000. We have one part-time code enforcement officer and a finance staff of 8 individuals. It would be very onerous on us to collect the additional tax rental income as well as enforce the tax collection provisions. It would also be very onerous upon us to enforce the permitting requirements and other regulations that would be required in regulating short-term rentals. So thank you.
Thank you. Next person in opposition, please.
One moment, Chair. Will the caller with the last 3 digits, 450, please slowly state and spell your name? You have 2 minutes and may begin.
Good evening. My name is Steve Schur, S-H-U-R. Madam Chair, I'm the president of the Travel Technology Association. My members include Airbnb, Vrbo, Booking.com, and many others. I'm here today in opposition to this bill in its current form. The bill will severely restrict short-term rentals in Nevada and may effectively be an all-out ban. Specifically, the distance requirement, the 2-night minimum, and the buffer from gaming facilities are hugely problematic for the short-term rental industry. And I'd like to share a few statistics about short-term rentals and their role in the travel and tourism economy. According to a recent poll that we did, 1/3 of travelers indicate that they will stay in a short-term rental this year. Nearly 75% of consumers who are very likely to travel this year believe that short-term rentals provide a valuable alternative to other lodging options when considering travel priorities like safety precautions. And lastly, 73% indicate that they will travel in-state this year, which means this bill will affect Nevada citizens as well. Short-term rental guests on average, stay longer and spend more money than hotel guests. And at a time when our industry, your industry, is coming out of one of the worst pandemics, or worst years ever economically as a result of the pandemic, now is not the time to restrict short-term rentals as an accommodations option for those travelers who are seeking to stay there. Travelers want options. Homeowners want the ability to earn some extra income, particularly in this difficult economic environment. And We should be opening all the doors to all forms of accommodations to attract visitors at pre-pandemic levels. AB 363 does the opposite. We remain hopeful that the committee will engage in a productive dialogue with our members, as you have been, and address some of the concerns that we have and find a path forward that works for all stakeholders, including Nevada homeowners, travelers, and community. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Next person in opposition, please.
One moment, Chair. Will the caller with the last three digits, 459, please slowly state and spell your name? You have 2 minutes and may begin.
Hi, everybody. My name is Luis Calderon, Calderon, and I'm a longtime resident of Las Vegas, Nevada. I am opposing this bill and the amendments that were presented today. I think everybody made some good arguments in terms of why there are benefits and negative parts of it, but one of them specifically was the revenue and the tax revenue that's been missed by having short terms not being regulated, and that's completely accurate. However, by putting the limit in the distance, right, aren't we sort of kind of taking away some of the revenue that we could gain by limiting the number of people that could come to Vegas? Additionally, it feels almost that some of the amendments at the end of the day were very cited to the casino and the gaming industry, and not necessarily towards some of the other arguments that were, the protection and the community and the local neighborhoods, right? And even looking at the fiscal plan and the additional requirements for, additional employees from the government side, none of that related to, policing or, the infrastructure or anything related to how do we make the community better, specifically in areas where there's no HOA. So I think this is sort of moving the right path, but it's lacking quite a lot of data in order to make an informative decision, I believe. We didn't get the information how many of the actual complaints are short-term rentals from places like that. So I don't necessarily think that this bill, as it stands right now, is mature enough to move forward with some amendments, specifically around the revenue.
2 minutes, if
and
you could
how
wrap it up, please.
So, thank you.
Thank you. Next person in opposition, please.
One moment, Chair. Will the caller with the last three digits, 963, please slowly state and spell your name? You have 2 minutes and you may begin now.
Yes, my name is Linda Riegel, R-I-E-G-L-E. I live in unincorporated Clark County. I oppose the legislation for the basic premise that it recognizes short-term rentals be allowed in residential neighborhoods. You too have recognized that principle by exempting HOAs. We have bought our homes and investors as well, knowing that zoning limited commercial activity, including short-term rentals. While there may be mom and pops renting rooms, the majority of these units are investors who have bought multiple properties and turned them into hotels. Vegas is a place people come to party. Many expect fully to have a, quote, what happens here, stays here experience. This is what makes our town the tourist town it is, but it belongs in tourist zones. A quick search on one platform shows 50 properties advertising they seat 20 guests or more. Illegal short-term rentals have been operating for a while, and we shouldn't let them make the tail that wags the dog. Similarly, if we would think that shoplifting is prevalent, we should just eliminate that as an offense. That isn't what should happen. If short-term rentals are to be allowed, this bill has a number of good points, but the provisions must be strengthened. Now, there must be a strict annual permit process. Those who have operated illegally must not be grandfathered in. They have violated the law. They should not be given advantages. If complaints are filed, the permits cannot be renewed annually. STRs must comply with fire and safety regulations, pay permit fees to enable localities to enforce regulation, and pay taxes. Occupancy must be limited. You cannot also allow based on the number of bedrooms, because what we've seen in this neighborhood is houses being turned into bunkhouses. There must be a limit to the number of permits per entity and related entities and per neighborhood. Distance regulations are vital here. In my neighborhood, house after house after house.
And we're at
has
2
been,
minutes. If you can please wrap up.
Yes. So there must be strong enforcement mechanisms, including fines, criminal penalties, right to seek injunctive relief, and a grant of a private right of action. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next person in opposition, please. And we've got about 10 more minutes of calls in opposition.
For the caller with the last three digits, 030, please slowly state and spell your name. You have 2 minutes and may begin now.
My name is Cindy Lohman, CINDY-LOWMAN. Thank you to Assemblywoman Wynn and the Revenue Assembly and Chair. I am a real estate broker, property manager, member of the National Federation of Independent Businesses, an STR owner, co-founder of Short-Term Rental Association, Henderson, and then most importantly, a single mom of twin 14-year-old boys. I oppose AB 363 as written. I do totally support making them legal throughout Nevada and appreciate all the work that has been done. With the legalizations of short-term rentals in Henderson in 2019, I turned our family home into one. In return, I have been able to support my family and able to build a future for my boys so they can own their own when they are of age and not have to struggle in life as so many people do. With the way the proposed law is currently written, we would lose this income with our dreams crushed. I think it is important for people to understand how a short-term rental really works and that the stereotype of them in the media is wrong. We open our home to families wanting to get away together in a safe, clean, and fun environment. We do not promote or allow parties. The bad guests we get on occasion are usually because Airbnb didn't vet them well, and that is an entirely new subject that needs to be addressed. I, as well as many other owners, have security measures in place, and we are prepared for possible problems and stop them before they become true problems. With a well-written law, this could be a mandate for all hosts. The guests that stay at our house go to local casinos as well as the ones on the Strip and downtown. They shop at the local grocery store, go to family-owned restaurant, bars, salons, boutiques, and spend their money. We have written data we can share about how much they spend. It helps our community immensely. The state is losing out on millions of dollars they could be making if they wrote a good law for short-term rentals with each owner paying taxes. Without a good law, the 7,500 plus illegal ones will continue to run underground, and the state makes nothing yet to exert the manpower and expense for problems that arise. Wouldn't it make more sense to write reasonable laws and state collect the tax and create more jobs? I ask that this bill be changed to be fair and reasonable or kill it. Thank you.
Thank you. Next person in opposition, please.
One moment, Chair. For the caller with the last three digits, 407, please slowly state and spell your name. You have 2 minutes and may begin now.
Hi, my name is Deanne Bourne, DEANNE BOURNE. I am an incline and I am a short-term rental share home owner. I oppose AB 363 as amended because of the large separation restrictions. After a serious accident, my story is that we lost half of our income for our mortgage payments, but we were able to keep our house by doing short-term renting. I believe that the proliferation of short-term rentals is a myth because volume in an area lowers the nightly price through supply and demand. It would eventually make short-term renting in that area unattractive to the potential host or the investor. Regarding revenue, the money from home short-term rental stays in the area. Hosts pay local carpenters, cleaners, electricians, plumbers, but they also spend the money at Home Depot and Walmart locally. I know this for a fact. Short-term rentals are good for the local economy. Casinos do pay enormous taxes, certainly, but much of their profit is not kept in Nevada. Lastly, not everyone is interested in staying in a casino hotel. I want a kitchen which caters to my special food needs, and I really prefer to stay in short-term rentals. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next person in opposition, please.
The caller with the last three digits, 052. Slowly state and spell your name for the record. You have 2 minutes and may begin.
Good evening. Thank you for taking my call. Renee Brown, BROWN. I'm a residential short-term host. I am not opposed to regulations, standards, additional insurance, and inspections. I also do not oppose paying reasonable permit fees to accomplish standardization and protect the community that we've lived in for 45 years. I do, however, oppose a 2-night and 3-night minimum. We live on site and list exclusively on the Airbnb platform. We have never experienced any issues with our guests or our neighbors who are aware and support our short-term rental. Although we've had people try to have parties, we've always been able to thwart it. We rent out a large family room equipped with a set of bunk beds, 2 queen beds, and a full private bathroom. Many of our guests are travelers between Salt Lake, San Francisco, Las Vegas, Northern California, and the Oregon coast. Some of those travelers are from around the world visiting America for the first time, and we are honored that they have chosen to stay with us. After 8 hours of traveling, Reno is the perfect one-night stop to rest and refresh. Our guests usually eat out, fill up their gas tanks, and then come back for a good night's sleep, leave early, and continue on their journey. We also host a handful of parents of students attending UNR, coming in for special weekends or sorority events. Other guests include families who come in for volleyball and soccer tournaments, seasonal skiers, and snowboarders. Our home is an affordable family setting with flexible check-in and check-out, and the assurance that the spaces are clean and sanitized to a very high standard. These are almost always one-night stays. In August and September, we do occasionally host guests for longer stays. Reno has great events like Hot August Nights, the air races, and the famous Reno balloon races. We often host pilots and their families, and we have hosted several Hot August Night participants. However, by and large, our guests stay one night. We have secure
Ma'am,
parking
we're at
available
2
on
minutes.
property.
If you could wrap it up, please.
I don't disagree with any of the standardization. Please don't hold us to a two-night minimum. Thank you.
Next person in opposition, please.
One moment. Will the caller with the last three digits, 947, please slowly state and spell your name. You have 2 minutes and may begin now. Caller, you
Good
may
afternoon,
begin your
Madam Chair, members of the Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the Committee on Revenue. Ryan Black for the record. RyanBlack. I'm representing myself today. I speak from a unique position as I previously worked for a local government agency enforcing business licensing and zoning regulations. Everything from businesses that affect the public health and safety, like liquor establishments, bars, nightclubs, marijuana establishments, pawn shops, smoke shops, ice cream trucks, all the way down to businesses that did not affect public safety, like street vendors, mobile car washes, and short-term rentals. I specifically worked on a team that responded to complaints regarding short-term rentals and investigated potential violations and completed follow-up regarding those complaints. I now consult in the private capacity for businesses like the ones I used to investigate. So I asked members of the committee, what is the point of this bill if it only applies in Southern Nevada, where most of the agencies have already gotten it figured out? The city of Las Vegas, the city of Henderson, the city of North Las Vegas have all specifically adopted regulations pertaining to short-term rentals, none of which needed an approval or denial from the state. The only problem this fixes is that it would require Clark County to allow short-term rentals, which as it stands are basically banned. Aside from that, most of the matters in this bill should be left to local governments to regulate, as is the case with most other local licensing matters. If the cities and counties believe short-term rentals were a serious problem, they would require these businesses to undergo privilege licensing requirements, which would include thorough background investigation, financial review, et cetera. There's already a mechanism to enforce regulations against unlicensed short-term rentals. There's already a mechanism for local jurisdictions to license short-term rentals. There is already a mechanism for local jurisdictions to implement and enforce short-term rental regulations. There is already a mechanism for local police departments to take actions on party houses, which is the number one complaint against short-term rentals. and most of which are also actually long-term rentals. So I'm just going to summarize and say that I agree with Assemblyman O'Neill's point, which is that I want Clark County to be able to solve their own problems. This is not a state problem, but a Clark County problem. So I'm opposed to this bill as written. Thank you.
Thank you. Next person in opposition, please.
For the caller with the last three digits, 319, please slowly state and spell your name. You have 2 minutes and may begin now.
My name is Rachel Hopper, RACHELHOPPER, and I'm a resident of Las Vegas, co-founder for the Short-Term Rental Association for Henderson, and an STR operator of 2 licensed properties since 2017. There's a lot I could tell you today. I could share that I've hosted over 800 stays with 0 issues, infractions, or neighbor complaints. I could let you know how much I paid in taxes over the years, or that 3 of my coworkers started working with me when they were laid off during the pandemic by strip hotels. And because of the work provided by my STRs, they were able to stay off unemployment. I can share the fact that I list my properties on a travel website for families of children with special needs, and that over the years I've hosted about 50 of these families that would never visit Vegas if they weren't able to stay in a house. I could share that I offered both my homes to victims of California wildfires and to frontline workers during the pandemic. And after the October 1 shooting, I had 2 families stay, one right after while waiting for news of their loved one. And on the first anniversary, I hosted a survivor who came back to Vegas for healing, but due to her PTSD, couldn't stay on the Strip. Yes, there's a lot I can share with you about the good STRs have done for local communities in our state. But I actually want to share more personal data with you. 72 and 4. That's my mom's age and the stage of her cancer. 5, that's how many days a week she has chemotherapy or a lab test or another doctor's appointment. 18, that's the average hours a day that as her sole caregiver, I spend taking her to and from appointments, helping her with chores of daily living, administering her medications, or helping her hold her 1-year-old grandbaby while she still can. 0, that's how much financial support Medicare would provide right now for a full-time home health aide. It's also how many hours of paid FMLA I have left from work, and because of that, the amount of my paychecks, a statistic that never concerned me until AB 363 was introduced. I want STRs to be legalized in Nevada, but I oppose AB 363 as written with the distance separation, 2-night minimum, and an occupancy regulation that counts kids of any age as an adult. AB 363 robs my daughter of getting to know her grandma and me of those final moments with my mom, and I would have to go back to work full-time to make up for the potential loss of this STR income. Before you go to vote, I hope you remember this data, this story, and my plea for you to vote no in its current state on AB 363. Thank you, Assemblywoman Nguyen, and the rest of the committee for your time and consideration of my concerns this evening.
Thank you. Next person in opposition, please.
For the caller with the last 3 digits, 501, please slowly state and spell your name. You have 2 minutes and may begin now.
Yes, hi, my name is Johnny Desmond, that's Desman. First, I appreciate Assemblywoman Nguyen for being open and willing to make this right for everyone. However, for STR operators, Bill AB 363 is extremely concerning, and I oppose it as written. With the way the provisions are written in this bill, this could be the final blow to not only the majority of STR operators' businesses, but to our livelihood. With the long 500 feet distance restriction between STRs and the 2,500 feet distance requirement from gaming centers, so many STRs are automatically eliminated without a fighting chance. Look, we've heard all the lazy excuses as to why people believe STRs are bad. 1, they're just party houses. I can tell you I've not had a single party at my STR. I provide rules and guidelines for guests to follow, and if these rules are broken, it is made clear that I can take action or ask the guests to leave. And 9 times out of 10, my guests are traveling business people or families on vacation, not people looking to have a party. Another bad excuse is STRs are bad for businesses for our local, or bad for business for our local hotels and casinos. I challenge everyone to name the number of hotels, casinos, or gaming centers that have been forced to shut their doors due to STRs nearby. I'll save you the time. The answer is 0, none, absolutely not. But if this bill passes, thousands of independent owners will be forced to shut theirs. It is time for a new approach. Instead of setting so many restrictions that make it nearly impossible to qualify, why not handle situations where owners are operating irresponsibly when those individual incidents occur? This is Las Vegas. We're supposed to be one of the most innovative cities in the world. These restrictions make us look like we are behind the times by a mile. It is time that people see STRs are actually good for the economy and offer travelers a new way to experience our lovely city, all while pouring money into our local neighborhood. We are about to enter the post-pandemic life, and the way travelers prefer to lodge will never be the same. If you take away STR options from travelers, there's a good chance many of them might just look elsewhere the next time they are planning a vacation. I appreciate your time.
Thank you. With that, we are almost to the end of opposition, but I do believe City of Las Vegas would like to make a statement. So please go ahead, Ms. Crompton.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. For the record, Kelly Crompton, representing the City of Las Vegas. As the first and largest jurisdiction to take on the short-term rental issue and enact an ordinance, we knew firsthand how complex, dynamic, and intense this issue is. We also know how incredibly difficult it is to balance the multitude of interests, especially neighborhoods and neighbors, with genuine entrepreneurs. The process to get the city's current ordinance that we currently have was extensive, it was exhaustive and exhausting, and it was contentious. And then we thought it was done. Except it wasn't. Even after the ordinance was enacted, public meetings on specific short-term rental applications regularly lasted for hours, most often stretching late into the night and into the early morning hours. This industry is constantly changing, and the city must change along with it. We remain ever vigilant on our efforts of enforcement and compliance efforts, and those efforts guide our response to ever-changing short-term rental market through local ordinance. In this regard, every community must retain the authority and responsibility to take similar course of action, namely to address the issue in the manner best suited for their unique circumstances within their unique community. I do have some more testimony that's way more than 2 minutes, so I'm going to submit that for the record. We have also submitted that to Assemblywoman Nguyen. We appreciate all the work she's done to talk with the jurisdictions that will inevitably have to enforce these restrictions, and we look forward to talking with all of you to answer any of your questions offline. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Crompton. And as a reminder, Ms. Crompton brought up a good point. If there is someone who wasn't able to testify or feels that they didn't get to say everything they wanted to say, please feel free to submit your written testimony in opposition or support, and we will take a look at that. Everyone on the committee will get that. So we're now going to go to neutral, and I will remind people that neutral is just providing information, not taking a stand on the bill in any way. So I don't think we have anyone on the Zoom, but let me double check. Our numbers of people on the Zoom have fallen dramatically, but okay, so without seeing anyone on the Zoom, is there anyone in the room in neutral? Seeing no one, we will go to the phones. We will also have the 45-minute time limit, although I doubt we'll get there. So please go ahead with the first caller in neutral if we have anyone.
If you would like to testify in neutral on Assembly Bill 363, please press *9 now to take your place in the queue. Again, if you would like to testify in neutral on Assembly Bill 363, please press *9 now to take your place in the queue. For the caller with the last 3 digits, 229, please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You have 2 minutes and may begin now.
Good evening, Chair and Committee. I am Jamie Rodriguez. That's spelled JamieRodriguez. I'm the Government Affairs Manager for Washoe County, and I want to thank both of the bill sponsors and the other proponents, who have met with me to discuss the goal of the bill as well as our concerns as was drafted. I very much appreciate the work that Assemblywoman Nguyen has put into this effort. We have met a few times, and I know, having helped with the outreach in Washoe County on our ordinance, just how many stakeholders there are in this discussion and the different desired outcomes from so many of the stakeholders. Our recently adopted ordinance in Washoe County took 5 years to put together and was passed as a balanced approach to the different stakeholders' concerns related to short-term rentals in Washoe County. We appreciate that our ordinance may not be perfect, but we are comfortable that we are in a good place and it was passed by my board. I am happy to work with Assemblywoman Nguyen in the future, should she or anybody else desire to look at creating statewide rules in the future. However, based on the conceptual amendment, which we are very appreciative of, we are neutral on the bill as it would no longer impact us and allow us instead to continue operating under the ordinances passed by Washoe County. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Next person in opposition, please. Next person in neutral, please.
For the caller with the last three digits, 412, please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You have 2 minutes and may begin.
Good evening, Madam Chair and members of the committee. My name is Christine Hess, that's CHRISTINEHESS, and I am the Executive Director for the Nevada Housing Coalition. The Nevada Housing Coalition is a statewide nonprofit established to advance and promote affordable housing for all Nevadans, with members representing the public and private sectors, urban and rural, across Nevada. We appreciate this opportunity to provide our neutral testimony on AB 363. Around the country, communities are having discussions about how to mitigate the impacts of short-term rentals on their housing affordability. There is research that shows that there may be harmful impacts, especially on first-time homebuyers and low-income renters. In fact, many communities recognize the impacts of short-term rentals, both through regulatory solutions and by designating a portion of their transient room tax to affordable housing, which helps our service workers with safe, sustainable housing. At this point, Nevada Housing Coalition is still studying the bill and the conceptual amendment that was just released. There are still a lot of moving parts, but we would like to offer our affordable housing perspective and engagement in working through this legislation. I would like to thank Assemblywoman Wen for her outreach. Again, the Nevada Housing Coalition is neutral on this bill. Thank you.
Thank you. Next person in neutral.
For the caller with the last three digits, 718, please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You have 2 minutes and may begin.
Thank you, Chair Cohen, for allowing my statement in neutral. My name is Wesley Harper, WESLEYHARPER. I am the Executive Director of the Nevada League of Cities and Municipalities. The League has concerns about AB 363 as conceptually amended. We do appreciate the extraordinary work of Assemblywoman Wen. We appreciate the distinguished members of the Assembly Committee on Revenue for considering this legislation. Our concerns are based upon the mandates included in the bill. Specifically, taking the recent conceptual amendment into account, Section 20 requires that each incorporated city in Clark County adopt a detailed ordinance, which is enumerated in the bill, to enforce and regulate short-term rentals. This imposes a substantial burden on our municipalities that are not staffed or otherwise resourced to comply with this mandate. Additionally, it imposes burdens on our members that have already enacted ordinances to regulate this unique activity and commerce in their jurisdiction. These members would have to realign their staffs and resources, which have been trained and acquired to implement their existing ordinance. Moreover, regulating and enforcing ordinance compliance of this activity and commerce is a matter of local concern. We submit that the manner and method of how short-term rentals are governed primarily affects and impacts areas located within each incorporated city. On this basis alone, this bill threatens to overreach through the inclusion of a mandated ordinance, notwithstanding the burden and cost it imposes on our members. We hope that the committee views this bill with scrutiny and respects the purview of local governments to properly govern according to the direct and unique needs of our residents. We would welcome the opportunity to continue discussions with Assemblywoman Wen and the other sponsors to strengthen this proposed legislation. Again, thank you very much, Madam Chair, for your attention and allowing my statement of neutrality.
Sir, I don't think that was exactly neutral, so we're just going to categorize that as opposition. And we'll go to the next person in neutral, please.
For the caller with the last three digits, 294, please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You have 2 minutes and may begin. I think we may have lost that caller.
Okay, thank you. Let's go on to the next caller, and that caller in neutral who you lost can call back in.
All right, we will take the next caller with the last three digits, 670. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You have 2 minutes and may begin.
Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the committee. I'm Jim Anderson, Andersen. I'm the Chief of Code Enforcement for Clark County, and as previously requested, I'm here to provide some statistics regarding our short-term rentals in unincorporated Clark County. Our short-term rental enforcement team only works reactively, which means we only respond to cases if a complaint is received from a resident in the area. We average in unincorporated Clark County approximately 800 short-term rental cases per year, and many of those properties receive multiple complaints from different area residents. In the past 3 years, Clark County Code Enforcement has handled approximately 2,500 short-term rental cases. We currently have 118 open and active cases regarding short-term rental violations. In the past 3 years, 133 short-term rental cases have had fines assessed against them. Of those 133 active cases, 76 have fines assessed, and current enforcement tools are not effective in getting the owners to cease operating illegally. So approximately 5% of all of our short-term rental cases result in fines being assessed. An average of 30 short-term rental cases per year reach the $5,000 fine threshold that is proposed in other legislation to bring those fines on the property and put them on the tax roll. In 2019, it was estimated that there were over 10,000 short-term rentals in the Las Vegas Valley. And in that same year, it was also estimated that over 6,000 of them were in unincorporated Clark County. More recent data suggests that we have approximately 15,000 short-term rentals in the Las Vegas Valley. So while Clark County has ordinances that work well to gain compliance for most of these violations, we struggle with gaining compliance from short-term property investors whose focus is on business versus preserving the character of the neighborhood. This concludes my comments, and I'll be happy to answer any questions if you have any more about statistics or enforcement.
Thank you, Mr. Anderson. Do we have any questions? So Mr. Anderson, I guess I do, and this is very anecdotal, and I don't know if you'd even be able to have any information, but you told us how many complaints there are, but is there any idea about how many people just don't bother? Maybe they call the police once or twice, but they don't bother to go forward with filing a complaint with code enforcement?
I don't have actual numbers on that. I think we've discussed many times some of the challenges are people don't necessarily know who to call if there's that sort of violation. And one of the challenges we face too is that often if police are responding to a noise complaint or a party complaint, it's not always associated with being a short-term rental. Police officers aren't always looking for that piece of information. I think more recently it's on the radar with the increase in violent crime. But overall, we really don't know.
Thank you, Mr. Anderson. I appreciate the information. With no more questions, we will move on to the next person in neutral.
If you have recently joined this meeting and would like to provide testimony in neutral to Assembly Bill 363, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. With a caller with the last 3 digits, 340, please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You have 2 minutes and may begin now.
Yes, I would like to speak on behalf of the anti-libertarian view that this position takes. I have been waiting for a long time. I cannot speak.
Sir, we're in neutral, so you can provide us your written testimony if you'd like.
I have already done that, but I couldn't get my word in.
Next person, please, BPS.
If you have joined this meeting and would like to provide testimony in neutral on Assembly Bill 363, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Chair, the line is open and working, but at this time, we do not have any callers wishing to participate in neutral testimony.
Thank you very much, BPS. So with that, we will invite Assemblywoman Nguyen back if you'd like to make any closing remarks.
Chair, we just got one more caller. Would you like me to take it?
Yeah. Let's. I invited the other person to call back in whose call had been dropped. So please go ahead.
One moment. Will the caller with the last three digits, 881, please slowly state and spell your name for the record? You have 2 minutes and may begin.
I'm Julie Davies, that's Davies, from Las Vegas. I'm a longtime short-term rental host, owner with legal short-term rentals, and I'm the educator who wrote the textbook used in university courses and real estate seminars on STR governance best practices. Now, I've heard in the testimonies some misconceptions that I would like to clarify, if I may. One of them is that STRs may not be remitting taxes at present. Legal, licensed short-term rentals are remitting taxes. And as business owners who want to keep our permits and our licenses, we're going to make sure that we're remitting our taxes because we don't want to lose our licenses. Now, the premise for the bill, the AB 363, has flawed because of it's
Ma'am,
put on
this
top
is
of a
this is
bill
testimony
that
in
was,
neutral.
I know.
So, okay, so
Yes,
neutral
I
is
know,
you're
but
taking no position on the bill.
I need to clarify.
Ma'am,
Well, what I'm doing is telling you a challenge with it. I'm sorry.
Right. So if you want to provide us just...
I want to. Okay. Well, let me tell you, the bill is about facilitators, accommodations facilitators collecting and remitting taxes. I have studied this in many areas, and I can assure you that it will not bring in more taxes and it will not make it easier for officials. And the reason is because there will be multiple accommodations and facilitators. Why do they want to do this? It's because they'll make millions of dollars. So it's important to understand that we as legal short-term rental businesses are remitting taxes. This isn't an industry that is not doing so at present. And we will continue if we want to keep our licenses, and we don't need accommodations facilitators to do so. That actually complicates things. So I wanted to clarify that, and I appreciate the opportunity to do so. And thank you for your attention to this important issue.
Thank you. So with that, we will bring neutral testimony to a close and have Assemblywoman Nguyen make any closing remarks that you'd like.
Thank you. Rochelle Nguyen for the record. Thank you all committee members for your attention and patience with this complex and passionate topic. Like I said before, I will continue to work on some of the suggestions that came out of this committee and the questions that you, thoughtful questions that you all asked, and continue to work to improve AB 363. I know that there was a lot of testimony in opposition. I think because of the late nature of that conceptual amendments, there might be some misconceptions about who this applies to. I think some of the grandfather language that I plan on including in Assembly Bill 363 will alleviate some of the concerns about people concerned about losing their business opportunities. I do think that this is a step in the right direction. As you Assembly members pointed out, the genie is out of the bottle, and I think we need to address it head on, and this is a step in that direction. So thank you for your consideration of Assembly Bill 363.
Thank you. With that, I will close the hearing on Assembly Bill 363 and move to public comment. BPS, do we have anyone in public comment?
If you would like to provide public comment, please press *9 now to take your place in the queue. If you would like to provide public comment for this meeting, please press *9 now to take your place in the queue. Chair, at this time, we have now one caller.
Please go ahead, and I will remind the caller and the public that public comment is a time to address issues generally before this committee, but not to rehear the hearing. So please go ahead.
The caller with the last three digits, 323, please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You have 2 minutes and may begin.
Yes, good evening, Madam Chair and committee members. My name is Keith Spencer, S-P-E-N-C-E-R, And, you know, I'm looking at this more of a neutral. I can see the need to augment.
The bill hearing
revenue.
on 363 is over. This is for public comment.
Oh, well, I thought that was still the same hearing. Okay. Have a good evening.
Thank you. If you would like to provide any testimony, though, for the 363, feel free to provide it in writing. So with that, I will bring public comment to a close. Anything from the committee? No. Okay, so just to wrap up, we do not have a hearing on Tuesday, but please feel free to watch Economic Forum for all the economic excitement. We should have the hearing on Thursday, though. So with that, thank you, BPS. Thank you, staff. And with that, we are adjourned.